Seconds until minions spawn.
In like middle school, two policemen pull me out of class, and I'm like, what's going on? They escort me out to the office, get us checked out, and I see my great aunt and great uncle, and I'm like, hey, what's going on? Is it something bad? And they're like, being quiet, and they say, yes. My brother and I we're getting emotional, we're like crying, we don't understand what's happening. Like earlier that week, I was reading Homestuck like on the school computers, and they were like, "Hey, stop doing that." Man, I don't have any friends. Just let me go read the goofy gray people comic, Are they arresting me because I was reading Homestuck on the computer? I don't know. Just little middle schooler brain didn't know what was happening. Great aunt and great uncle just kind of like skedaddle off back home. We get assigned a caseworker, and they start driving us off to the facility that we're going to be sent to. It was one of the really big ones called before I got in, I thought it was kind of a nice organization because, you see billboards around for it, they help kids. It was just something else. It wasn't great. They forced us to go to church and have speakers like come onto the premises, but the way they conducted themselves just wasn't really reflective of, I guess, a holy person's teachings. They were just not nice people.
When did you realize your dad had a meth addiction?
Around like 11 or 12, I started connecting the dots. He was yelling at my brother about something, right? Just getting really aggressive, talking really fast, raising his voice, just being really hostile. And I, as the older sister, felt a need to step in and protect. Don't, effing yell at him. And he starts like foaming at the mouth, and he grabs me by the head, and he like throws me into the wall like repeatedly. And I'm like, this is not normal. This is not okay. There's something like deeply wrong with him. And I remember like my mom talking about his prescription addictions and other stuff like that, but kind of hush-hush. Like she didn't want us to know about it. So I'm actually from Louisiana. I was born and raised there until I was about like 10. I didn't know the reason why, but my dad's meth addiction made it to where he couldn't get work anywhere in the area. So we all went to Texas. He was able to get work there. He and my mom had a falling out, so he like framed her for like domestic violence and stuff. So she was in jail and like out of the picture. Me and my youngest brother, our dad didn't really like trust us. He just grew more distant from us until he was like, okay, things are like really hard right now. I'm gonna drop you off at this great aunt and great uncle who you've never met. Then he's like, okay, I'll be back in like 2 weeks. He never came back. The great aunt and great uncle like tried to make it work, but they're like retirement age. They're trying to like just do their own thing, out in the countryside. They don't want to deal with like two like preteens, right? They just what's the word? Voluntarily like surrender us to the state. They considered like keeping me and just shipping off my brother. He can be a lot for one person. I love him dearly, but he's a lot to live with. But they were like, we don't want to separate you. And I had a lot of resentment for him for years after the fact. As adults, we're okay now. We've reconciled and we've talked about that, and it's fine now. In Texas, there's a lot of foster children. At the time I was there were more foster children than there were actual foster homes. Whenever there's not enough of those, or your level of care is higher than a regular foster home can handle, they send you to a placement. Basically an orphanage, but they don't really call it that. Where they just kind of like send all like these dozens of kids to go live in this one building. You'll get a caseworker. They will try to get you the best placement that they can based on your level of care that you need. You have like 6 to 8 girls in a single like dormitory sized room. When they're like trying to figure out what to do with you for those first 90 days of that very first placement, you don't have any windows. There's like no doors. The lights are always super bright, and whenever it's like time to go to bed, one of the staff members she sits on a chair in the doorway with no door in it with her clipboard and just watches you and the other like 5 or 6 girls trying to sleep. So not so fun fact, I can sleep through anything. Fire alarms can't wake me up. Super bright lights can't wake me up. Because you just get used to these like super crazy like sleeping conditions. There's also like cameras like inside of the facility as well. Sometimes there just wouldn't be running water. Sometimes there would be like straight orange water, like rust or something. Moldy bread, just not just it was rough. The kids that do have visitation, they take them outside and let them play outside, and the rest of us gotta just like sit in the room and wait until they're done for like 2 hours. We would take this giant white pedo van to school, so all of the kids knew, oh hey, there's the kids, there's little orphans coming through. One time we're loading up in the van, just getting ready. It was raining outside. The staff was in the front seat, just waiting for everyone to get gathered up. There were 3 rows in it. I was in the middle row. The girl beside me kept pulling the hair of the girl in front of me, and the girl in front of me turned around and thought that I was the one who was like pulling her hair, and she like smacked my glasses off. So I jumped over the front seat, just grabbed her by the head and just bashed her head into the side of the car the same way that my dad did to me. It's really the only way you have to not get walked over when you're in care. anymore. You develop these groups, you protect each other, but you have to still defend yourself. Otherwise, you're gonna get stepped all over. One girl got pregnant and thought that if she like had a kid, they would let her leave because clearly she can't raise a baby, you know, while in this group home, in the system, right? All they did was take away her baby anyway. So now they're both in the system. Like, you can try and make friends, you can try and do stuff with people. Like, you can try to, but it'll be weaponized against you. We had a girl who was really into basketball. She was really good at basketball. And she just said something, like some comment or something to one of the staff members who was being snide with her. And she was like, whatever, I need to go get ready for the game in an hour. And the staff was like, what game? You're not going. And just breaking this girl's heart, because that was all she had, was just this one sport that she could do. This sense of like camaraderie and teamwork that she had, which is just taken away at a whim. There was a little girl who was about like 5 or 6. She got in, she just lost her mom and her dad. You know, she's screaming, she's acting out, she's doing a lot. At the time, I couldn't really appreciate it, but now I understand that she's going through probably the hardest time of her life right now. And there is a really big staff member, and whenever she couldn't keep the girl under wraps, she like sat on her. She physically sat on this kid to keep her in one place so she would stop like running around and causing a ruckus in their eyes. And my brother, he threw a bar of soap at the lady to make her stop so she would direct her attention at him instead. It sounds like something out of a Hallmark movie. It's so goofy, but that's what it was. Before my brother realized he's trans, he's my brother, but back then he was my sister. He thought he was not straight. And when the staff found out, they would hit him with like oh, you know, they turn, they burn. Just really awful like commentary that didn't help anybody involved. Most of them did miss their families. A lot of them were in there for petty reasons. Oh, their parents got caught with some weed. Their parent is in jail for shoplifting or something. Just things that probably wouldn't really justify like separating a family. And generally in foster care, the goal is to get you back with your family. They want to get you back with a relative. They don't want to just ship you around to a variety of strangers until you turn 18.
Was that the last time you saw your great aunt and great uncle?
Yeah, I haven't seen them since then. I only knew them for like a few months. I really do hope they're doing well. I think they just did the best that they could for their situation. I was very mad at the time, but I was a kid, I didn't know any better. Was
that the last time you saw your mom and dad?
Yeah, I've not seen them in 12, 13 years. Went through a period where I had some unhealthy behaviors, and I would look them up on social media just to try and see how they were doing. Same old, not making good choices for themselves. Just wishing and praying that they would change so I could try and have a family again. But it's fine, because there's many ways to forge a family. I have my fiance. We got engaged a couple of weeks ago. Love him very much. I still have my brother. I still have my friends. You just have to accept that sometimes the people whose responsibility it was to take care of you in this world aren't going to fulfill that responsibility. People can change. People can do better for themselves, but they're not. They're just not doing that. There's a girl named, and she had really severe scoliosis. The state wouldn't pay for her care, so she would take this cardboard box and like make a panel out of it and like secure it to her back to try and straighten out her back. And she was like 11 at the time. The younger ones usually were able to get into a willing foster home, so any young children that did get sent to group homes usually had pretty strong behavioral issues, and they just weren't very well liked. Which sucks, because I know it's not their fault. They're children. They don't know any better. That girl with the scoliosis was not very well liked. The kids didn't know what kind of medicine they were taking. They didn't know what it was called or like what it did. They just knew the shape and the color. And I was so scared to go on like antidepressants and stuff for a super long time, because I thought, okay, they're gonna keep me sedated and over-medicated, and it's just gonna ruin my quality of life. And then I learned as an adult I didn't really need them anyway. I was just going through a very difficult situation. Most people would have strong feelings of sadness during that kind of situation. There's nothing wrong with taking medication. You need to know what it's for and how it's going to help you.
Do you feel kids being over-medicated was a serious problem?
For sure, 100%. Some of them couldn't enunciate sentences very well. They would come in very hyper, very full of energy, and after a month or so of taking medication at the suggestion of a psychiatrist on the payroll of the group home, they would just shut down. Yes ma'am, no ma'am, go to their room, don't do anything, which is very convenient, I imagine. There were a couple of girls who, they somehow managed to get a hold of phones and create Facebook profiles, and they would say that they were like older than they really were to try and like date older men, and I was like, you are such a lie and a half, you need to stop like tricking people, da 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 da. So some people didn't like me for not minding my own business at the time. I was generally keeping my head down and minding my own, so people didn't dislike me too terribly much. Some people just didn't like it. Like there was one girl who would always like pull my hair out of a ponytail. Like it's such a really tiny thing and it doesn't feel like a big deal, but it was constant. It made me so mad. I beefed with her a lot. But for the most part, I got along with people pretty okay. Around Christmas, all the volunteers want to come say hi to us. All the volunteers suddenly like love us and want to spend time with us. There was one lady who came in, this mom and like her 5 or 6 kids, and they wrote us a song and they like sang us the song. And those kids looked so uncomfortable and like they so didn't want to be there, which is fair because we were like, what are you doing here? They called it CIA, Children in Action, and I was like, okay, go off, I guess. We would be the kids you see on like, it was like Adopt a Child, Christmas tree stuff, you'd see like in the mall sometimes. Good Samaritans would come, give donations, and send them to the facility. I got a Nintendo 3DS. One of those years. That was pretty cool. Played a lot of Animal Crossing. I would hide my 3DS. I would hide my couple of games. I would generally just like open up the mattress and like stick it underneath there. Never had any issues getting that stolen.
How did you feel about aging out of the system?
I knew from the day I got in it was gonna happen. Like it was scary, you know, you're pretty much just kind of sent on your own and told good luck. I knew it was gonna happen, and I was mostly just looking forward to the day that I can choose where I want to live, and I can choose my social circles, and I can choose to do what I want to do. Whenever you leave, there is this fear of ending up in a very similar situation. You realize that you were pretty close to being homeless, or being abducted, or being in a really awful situation. You drive by the Salvation Army and you're like, you know, that could be me after like one bad month. That could be me after like 1 or 2 missed paychecks. So it just keeps you kind of on edge about your situation and how fragile it really is.
How well do you think the system prepared you for life on your own?
It didn't. I had horrible phone anxiety. I couldn't like answer a door. Someone would like knock on the door and I would like wait for someone else to get it until I realized, wait, I'm an adult now. I have to get the door. It doesn't prepare you at all. It's its own ecosystem, its own rules, its own laws, its own expectations, and it doesn't prepare you for the real world at all.
How do you think the system could be improved?
Funding, I guess. Up the funds to not shove 6 kids in a single bedroom. Have the funds to have hot running water. And you're gonna see this all across the country and not just Texas, but social services is very starved for any funding. These things are just not valued very highly in the United States. So it's just a symptom of a much wider scale issue.
If you could tell everybody in the world one thing, what would it be?
Just be patient. Life does get better.
Alright, so in computer science, a function is a little snippet of code that takes an input, does some stuff, and returns an output. A function is called pure if it has no side effects, and it returns the same output when given the same input. Functional programming is a style in computer science that's built around pure functions, alongside the techniques that are necessary to actually do that in practice. In particular, it's a style that discourages the use of mutability and global scope. Alright, so the main question that we're going to ask today is, why would you do this to yourself? Pure functions are like normal functions, except with extra restrictions on them. So when you're doing functional programming, it's like doing normal programming, but you're allowed to do less stuff. In the rest of this video, we're going to try to figure out what's going on here and why so many people decide to do this to themselves. As a starting point, let's take an example from every intro to computer science class. Building a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. It's something designed to get you to think like a computer. And no matter what you do, they always tell you to give more detailed instructions, as if a real developer wouldn't have access to libraries. Barring pedantic professors, this works well the first time you go to create a sandwich. But if you want to make another one, you run into all sorts of problems. Your kitchen is a mess. The drawer is open, the knife is out, the jar of peanut butter is open and out on the counter, and the jelly is already out of the fridge. If you send your robot back and tell it to follow the same instructions, it'll go something like this. The problem here is twofold. The program depends on the state of the kitchen in order to work correctly, and it modifies the state of the kitchen every time it runs. If we had access to a magic function that didn't affect anything else but always created peanut butter, and we also had similar functions for bread and jelly, then we could combine them together to make a sandwich. What's more, because these are isolated, we can run them again and again without worrying about the state of the kitchen. On smaller projects, many developers found it easy to deal with mutations. But as their projects grew, the mutable state became harder and harder to manage. They had a bunch of different little snippets of code, all trying to make changes in the same areas, and eventually they started to run into conflicts. Deep down, these are all issues around complexity. People were running into so many issues dealing with mutability and global scope that they decided it would be easier to just get rid of it entirely. There are many issues related to this, but today I want to focus in on some of the biggest factors. Consider the following snippet of code that compares two lists. This takes two lists, looks for the first element where they differ, and then runs the comparison on that element. This is the same as the default string comparison if you treat strings as lists of characters. This method is mutable because it loops through the list by removing elements from it. This is confusing because most developers use this function to get the result of the comparison, but mutability makes it have an additional, unrelated effect. If you go to use this comparator, the comparison will work correctly and give you the right result, but then later in the program, when you try to access the value of team 1, you'll get the wrong answer. This is because the compare method modified the list, even though the developer didn't expect it to. This gets even worse when compare is used somewhere deep in your call stack. If you try to use this method as the comparator for a sorting algorithm, the entire sort will just return garbage. What's worse, it'll be flaky and unreliable. If lists generally have different first elements, this will work most of the time, but as soon as you put in a different input, it'll return something completely nonsensical. Sort of related to this is unit testing. If I have a function that's pure, then I only need to test the mapping of inputs to outputs. To fully test the behavior, I can just create the inputs, call the function, and then verify that the output was what I expected it to be. Of course, to fully verify this, I have to test it out on different types of inputs. But the structure of the test is the same and fully encapsulates the behavior of the function. If the program relies on mutability, there's all sorts of other edge cases that I have to test for. What happens if I call the function again, but the global state is different? And more confusingly, what happens after I call the function? If I rely on impure functions, I have to test all of these scenarios in order to get complete coverage. Deep down, what's going on in both of these examples is that impure functions increase the surface area of your API. The API of a pure function is defined entirely through its input and output, but an impure function can interact with the world in all sorts of other ways. This brings us to our next problem. Concurrency is hard. Consider the seemingly innocuous function that increases the player's score. It looks totally fine, but if you try to run this in parallel, disaster happens. We'd expect the program to execute like this, but because the threads can run in any order, the program might actually execute like this. If the threads aren't executed in the right order, the whole program breaks and you get the wrong value. We have ways to deal with this, like locks and queues, but even those take a lot of thought and careful planning. The order matters here because both threads are trying to read and modify the same bits of data. Because pure functions can't access or modify anything outside of the scope of the function, they also can't access or modify things that are touched by other threads. When we use pure functions, everything is isolated, so we just avoid this problem entirely. Consider the following program which computes the Fibonacci numbers from 0 to 100 and adds them to a list. If we wanted to run this in parallel, we'd have to be exceedingly careful, because we might run into concurrency issues when the list is modified. In contrast, if we did this in a functional style, and get Fibonacci was a pure function, we could confidently transform the math into a parallel operation without any additional planning. Okay, so having pure functions is great, but how do you actually do it? Let's start with a simple example of building a response to a web request. In the mutable side, we can start with a mostly empty HTML string, and then use different functions and methods to add stuff to it. This starts with a template that's fundamentally incomplete, and then add stuff to it during the life of a program, sort of like building a house brick by brick. In contrast, in the functional style, you would think of the HTML response as a template, with certain parts of that template left to be evaluated elsewhere. You'd then fill in the missing pieces, which in turn might call out to other methods to build up the rest of the subcomponents. What's interesting here is that the functional style is fully defined at the time that it's first declared. In the imperative style, it actually represents something different at different points in time during the program's evaluation. Pure functions are interesting because they behave less like a procedure and more like a function in mathematics. Because a pure function always returns the same output for the same input, it's fully defined by the mapping of inputs to outputs. It also doesn't have any side effects, so you don't need to worry about how the function is actually executed. Any pure function with the same mapping of inputs to outputs is behaviorally exactly the same, even though some implementations might be more efficient. What's really interesting is that because the function is fully defined by this mapping of inputs to outputs, we can think of it more like a data structure, like a dictionary or a hash map, rather than an action that does something. In the mathematical view, a function is just a set of points in space. I find it helpful to think in this way when designing functional programs. Instead of thinking of them as a set of instructions or actions passed to a machine, it can be helpful to think of them as complete objects built of smaller subcomponents, where some parts of the object are yet to be evaluated. HTML templating is a pretty common design pattern, so let's look at a more interesting example. What's tricky here is that this function does something many times. So traditionally, you would need a loop to encapsulate this behavior. The loop uses an index that increases from 0 to 99 during each iteration of the loop. In the functional world, one way to handle this is through recursion. We can sort of loop through all the numbers from 0 to 99 by recurring on the function with smaller and smaller numbers. This is technically the ideological equivalent of using I minus minus, but I think this style is easier to follow for recursive methods. Importantly, the return statement is a complete description of the final output, with some steps left to be evaluated. In particular, get squares of 99 is actually equal to 99 squared plus get squares of 98. This pattern is so common that some languages even offer an optimization called tail recursion, which makes the recursive implementation as efficient as the imperative one, by transforming the recursive calls into while loops under the hood. You have to be careful though, because some languages don't. Some languages don't offer tail recursion intentionally because there's one guy that doesn't like this recursive style. There's also another way to think about this. In this example, we're using the index I to iterate through or do something to all of the numbers between 0 and 99. What's interesting is, in the functional world, instead of iterating over a single integer variable, we can instead think about I as the entire list of numbers from 0 to 99. Then, instead of iterating over an integer, we can view this as a static operation on that list of numbers. In order to compute our answer, we can take the list, map each element to its square, and then add everything up, reducing the list down to compute the answer. This pattern of taking a list and making a new list by doing something to each of the elements is so common that we can abstract out the bits of common code. If we wanted a generic function that does something to every element of the list, we could write it like this, and then pass the operation squaring each number as input. In the functional world, map is this function that takes a list as input and creates a new list by applying a function to every element of that list. This style of using code that takes a function as input is very common in functional programming. A big part of the reason is that without objects, we need tools to specify what happens to each element in an arbitrary sized data structure. Alongside map, we have reduce, a tool for combining elements down and collecting them, often to a smaller final result. This pattern of using map followed by reduce is so popular that there are even infrastructure frameworks named after it. It's powerful because we can use functional programming's ability to play nice with concurrency to run MapReduce jobs at enormous scale. Now at this point, you might be asking yourself, if I have to create a new list every time I use map, isn't that super inefficient? If I really want my functions to be pure, don't I have to use immutable data structures everywhere in my code? What if I only want to change one element of an array? Won't I have to copy the whole thing? We'll be answering these questions and more in part 2 of my video on functional programming. I hate to split these into parts, but there really was so much content that I couldn't cover it all in a single video. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel to keep an eye out for it when it drops. And feel free to leave comments on this video letting me know what you think. I do read each and every one of your comments, and I put a lot more effort into getting consistent audio quality in this video, so I hope that's something that you all enjoyed as well. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
to Summoner's Rift. "30 seconds until minions spawn." Minions have spawned.
New season, new me, baby. Isn't it pretty rewarding picking up new champions that you know are going to be strong the whole season? AKA every bruiser this time around. But when picking up new champions, you guys know there's always that risk that your pick gets nerfed to the ground and all your effort goes to waste. To this day, I'm still angry that I put in hundreds of hours into Twisted Fate and Rise only for them to be completely useless in solo queue. Thanks, pro players. Which is why I'm super grateful for this champion and build I'm about to share with you. This build has been strong every season I've used it in and basically unchanged for nearly a decade now. God, that is depressing to say. And for those of you who don't know, I'm Hector, a 5-role challenger player. I'm just saying that because it means I have access to any sweaty champion I want in any role to climb with. I could pick up Akali, Graves, Jax. I have all these disgusting options to climb with, but this is still one of my immediate go-to picks when I want to climb as high as possible in solo queue. It's support Nami. Not with that garbage though, but with these items instead. First, let me tell you what kind of build this is, then I'll explain why it's not as troll as it looks. This is a very chill build that takes almost zero effort to pull off. I'm talking you got Singles Inferno on in the background while you play levels of easy. And yet, it has the carry potential very close to even the sweatiest of champions like I said, Graves, Nidalee, Aurelia, you name it. Upon seeing it though, it may seem like a smurf build for high level players to stomp low elo. No way an average support can go these items every game and not be griefing, right? I had the same thought, so I first recommended this build to a gold elo friend of mine. He's not very good, and he's never played Nami before. But it instantly became one of his favorite builds that he has the most fun on, and he immediately got a 60% win rate even without half of the tips I'm going to be giving you in this guide. So why is it good? Well, the first reason is that solo queue is kinda stupid. I don't have to tell you that. Every game is chaos and you never know what to expect. So one of the best qualities I look for in a champion is their ability to be versatile. Adapting to your teammates' random decisions is really valuable, and Nami is good to great at everything she does. She can engage, disengage, play front to back, roams very well, can play for lane, etc. Which allows you to play well with your teammates no matter what shenanigans they're getting up to. The second key quality I look for in a champion that makes them OP is having early agency while still having late game insurance. Every top lane main hates Gangplank for this reason. He will dominate the lane phase whenever he's meta, and he will still scale to one-shot your entire team later into the game. Early power lets you have control over the laning phase, which is where many games can be decided, but having insurance for later into the game in case your team Omega trolls early is also really good for consistently carrying games. This is why late game champions like Victor, Azir, and Jinx tend to be really popular and perma-picked during patches where they're strong during the laning phase. Now most people know that Nami is a lane bully, but many players think she kinda falls off later. Trust me, she definitely doesn't with this build. Nami randomly has crazy good AP ratios on her abilities, starting with her passive. To put it lightly, speeding up people in League is very broken, and unlike other enchanters such as Lulu, all of Nami's abilities speed up her teammates, so she is constantly providing bursts of movement speed to everyone around her. Stacking ability power to make this even stronger is very, very good. On top of that, once you get AP, her E becomes a disgusting slow. Look how little this Zoe can move once my E's been applied to her. Same thing with this Karthus a little later. He may as well be stunned because he cannot move an inch. The best part is that you're providing all of these movement speed advantages a billion yards away from any danger on top of a bunch of extra damage. You're about to see a terrible LeBlanc combo. But pay attention to all the blue numbers that pop up around her target. It doesn't matter that my LeBlanc's combo was super scuffed. I just gave her over 900 extra damage from all the way back there. And look, my spells are already almost back up to do that again. Basically, you want to stack ability power because your buffs and debuffs are really broken with high amounts of AP. You make the game really easy to play for your teammates, and it makes it almost impossible for them to mess up when you're around them. Well, almost. This might sound like a crazy take, but here goes. To emphasize how strong she is late game, I would personally rather have a 6-item Nami than a full build Vladimir or Kassadin on my team any day. And we haven't even talked about her W's unique scaling yet, but let's hold off on that for a moment and break down her build first. Like I said, your goal is to stack as much ability haste and flat AP as possible so you can constantly dish out powerful buffs. So, you go support item, Dark Seal, then you build Lucidity Boots and Imperial Mandate. Now this is very important. You go Medjai's every single game. Yes, no matter what. So you can see I just died a silly death here, and I've only got one stack left on my Dark Seal, but I will still buy Medjai. That is because it is the most cost-efficient flat ability power item in the game. Plus, it's a super cheap legendary item which gives you an extra 15 AP from your Mandate. As an enchanter, you also play fights from really far away most of the time. It's difficult for you to die unless you miss position, so you stack it easily anyway. It is not a smurf item, it is not a purely snowball item. Buy it every game, no matter what's going on or how far behind you are, and it's almost always going to be a good purchase. Okay, now you can round out your build with mostly anything you need. That being said, I almost always prioritize going Death Cap now, as it is by far the best item you can build for carry. Of course, on average, you get to build Death Cap 1 out of every 3 games, so it's definitely not something you can get all the time, but unless I really need another support item, it's what I almost always build after completing Medjai's. Now before moving on, I have to address it. Every time I've recommended this build to someone, I always get the, why not Sword Boots and Ludens and Shadow Flame to one-shot people? Okay, so Magic Penetration is actually not that good on Nami, because a lot of your damage comes from your E, which you give to your teammates. Penetration doesn't work with your E, it's based on your teammate's pen. So as you can see, before this Ari bought Swords, you can see it was doing 24 damage. After she buys her penetration, you can see my E starts to do 26. Ultimately, this is a utility build that happens to deal some good damage. You can do the funny AP one-shot montage stuff if you want, it's just not that good. Before we get into the best tricks I know for how to carry as Nami, I strongly recommend you check out our website Skill Cap. It teaches League of Legends the right way, from the low elo perspective, which is why our members tend to climb stupidly fast. We don't waste time on teaching you strategies that only work in pro play, because low elo is simply a different game. It's way more chaotic, and playing wrong is often right if you want to carry the worst teammates possible, even as a support. So check us out after this. I'm told I'll get a free pizza if you use my discount link in the description. And of course, if Skill Cap doesn't work for you when actively using it, you can just get a refund anyway, so there's no risk. Okay, now that you know why I think this champion is OP and how to build her, let's round out this guide with some tips. Remember how I mentioned her W scaling? Well, you see, this is literally my favorite ability in the game because it actually has a very unique mechanic to it. So her W technically has a really high AP scaling of either 125 or 100% of your AP based on your targets. That's pretty high on a basic ability, right? But it's technically balanced around the fact that supports typically build little amounts of AP, and each bounce gets weaker. What most people don't play around though is that her W has a second AP ratio. After 200 ability power, each bounce actually begins to get stronger. Again, this is one of the reasons we're stacking AP. This is why I love the ability so much, because at some point in the mid-game, you need to start making a conscious effort to completely change the way you press the spell to get max value out of it. Normally, you cast your W on your intended target, but after 200 AP, you want the third bounce to go into your main target. So for example, you reach around 400 AP every single game very easily with this build. If I want to get max damage on this dummy, I'd want to cast it on this other one first. This is already a 100 damage difference, and this only becomes more relevant the more and more AP you have. For example, I have over 600 ability power this game, and I'm just having fun killing the enemy team. However, I mess up, and W Ezreal first, barely missing this kill. I remember to stop being trash for a moment, and when I flash in, you can see I W myself first to get more damage out of my W, this time actually finishing him off. This also matters a lot if you're healing, of course, as you can spike someone's HP a lot more this way. Now to be honest, min-maxing your bounces isn't something you have to do. You can win on this champion by autopilot pressing E and W on your teammates. Remember how I said I gave this build to my friend? He doesn't even know this, and he's doing really well without it. But this is my favorite designed ability in the game, and I constantly find myself trying to get max value from bounces, even at mediocre amounts of AP, just because it's really fun? I know, having fun in League. Cringe. IMO, it's just a really cool ability. Have fun with it. Min-maxing your bounces isn't something you have to do to win on her. Don't worry about it if you don't think to do it. This next tip, though, can actually be very important to securing kills. You see, Nami tends to work best with champions who can dash forward to reach their target and apply her E. This is why Nami Lucian is so popular as a combo, as most of you know. Remember this block clip from earlier? To be really good at Nami, you also want to get your W's damage on your teammate's target. So look at what I do here. If I press W on the block now, the bounce obviously won't reach Kaisen. What you need to do is time your W right before your teammate dashes. This way, you're still in range to cast it. Then, as it travels, your teammate dashes, gets in range of the enemy, and you get your W's damage bounce off. Getting the timing on this right can sometimes be a bit tricky, as you have to predict the exact moment your teammate will dash. which requires some game sense. So again, it's one of those min-maxy things you don't need to do, but it definitely helps score way more kills when you do it. Now, if you end up playing this build a lot, you're going to start realizing how OP your buffs actually are by how easily you allow your teammates to delete people. But when you know you're super powerful and your teammates don't go in when you buff them, it can get really triggering. Like this Varus, I pressed E on him, which would let him get in range to auto and murder the Ezreal, but he just isn't aware of it. Unfortunately, there's no solution to this besides just climb LP. But don't get me wrong, this build is still very good in low elo, but it is way more fun when you're with a duo you trust, or in like Masters plus elo. But there is one way to make sure you don't waste your E too often. You can actually press it while your teammate's projectile is in air. I see my copy auto-attack this Darius. Now I know my E isn't going to be a waste, so I pressed a spell while the projectile is in the air. This is again just another small tip, but good to know when you're working with less than competent players. Okay, those are the optional, more try-hard tips to know. Now let's cover some really basic Nami stuff that you should do every single game. For starters, I'm in the same boat as you guys. If you've played Nami before, you'll know that landing bubble is impossible. It's actually just a myth that you can land a spell while the enemies move. So the most basic, but really good combo you need to know is just R into Q. Landing your wave at close range is much easier than landing Q, so you can just wave into a guaranteed CC chain. Easy peasy. As for your ultimate, my best tip is to just chill with it. A lot of players on Nami feel pressured to immediately press this spell. I mean, I get it, the ability is very strong, it does a lot of damage, CCs, and goes very far. And then your opponents just lazily walk out of it with 0. So depending on the range, your ult is way too easy to avoid, so be patient with it. It's okay to not send a spell immediately, and to instead wait for an opportunity when your opponents are fully committed. Remember, this champion is very versatile. It's okay to save it for disengaging as well as starting a fight. Also, if you see a fight brewing, you want to consider waiting for your opponents to get into a more narrow corridor. This spell is very broken in the jungle. Instead of pressing your ult immediately, you can often win games by waiting for those key moments when your opponents trap themselves in a juicy corridor angle. Oh, and your Q and ultimate also give you movement speed when they land or pass through your allies. I don't have a clip of this mattering right now, but trust me when I say knowing this is surprisingly relevant. And that's about it. Like I said, this is a really chill champion. You don't need to know that much to have insane success on her. There is definitely skill expression for those of you who want it, but boy can you autopilot and win games by just pressing E and W on cooldown. Which brings us to the final tip you need, how to afford this. Needless to say, buying a death cap costs mucho dinero. How can I possibly even recommend this? Well, in solo queue, especially in low elo, there's so much random chaos and fighting that you're bound to rack up a lot of kills and assists, which will definitely make buying this build possible. But there's a few rules I follow on Nami to make sure I'm always strong and my buffs can carry games. First, it is good to take kills early into the game to get to your mandate faster. Nami has one of the best one-item spikes in the game, so being able to rush your mandate fast is worth annoying your ADC. This is definitely worth it, and you can stop taking kills after completing your mandate. 2. If you watch skill cap guides, they may tell you to not share tower gold, kinda like this. Typically this is really grief to do because you should be funneling gold to your carry. But with this build, you better believe you're the carry, even if your team doesn't know it. Funny thing is, in high elo, I'd immediately get called a win trader by my Yasuo here. But no one gets mad if you do this in low elo because no one even knows how troll it is for you to do. Finally, I really limit how many control wards I buy. I basically don't buy a single one unless I'm going to press Baron or Dragon. I mentioned this in a lot of my guides, and I really should explain it in more detail later. The control wards are very overrated in solo queue. They're usually just a waste of gold, so only buy 1 or 2 per game at most. Trust me on that. And that is it. I know the build seems silly and that there's no way it works, but trust me, it is one of the best carry builds I've ever found. I love playing Nami this way, and hope you find similar success on her. Anyway, see ya.
If you followed Skillcapped at all, then you will know of a certain person who works with us called Hector. It's no secret that our resident challenger player Hector is one of the most unique players in solo queue. He not only consistently plays Phil to top 50 challenger every season, but he has mechanics so questionable, it gives even the most iron of iron players hope that they can one day grow up and be just like Hector. A big brain challenger, even if his fingers seem to have aged in dog years. Today, we sent Hector to commentate games at around Platinum Elo to show us how he completely obliterates players of similar skill that you're likely to face, with a simple rule he always follows in League of Legends that you will not have heard of before, the stop sign rule. Okay, well, if you drive, then you've heard of this rule. But why on earth are we talking about it in a League of Legends guide? Well, by far one of the biggest roadblocks preventing players from climbing is autopiloting. What do we mean by this? By definition, autopiloting is to act without conscious thought and usually occurs when doing something you've done many times before. So, hands up if you've ever hit a minion before. In just a few games, you'll get hundreds of CS. If you play a few games a day for a week, you'll get thousands of CS. It's safe to say that interacting with waves in general is a task everyone has done many times before, making it a serious hotspot for autopiloting. Let's take a quick look at an example. Here, we have Hector on Kale versus Garen. Garen wants to keep the wave neutral so he can go for extended trades. Let's find out if he's using his brain or if he's on autopilot.
Okay, so let's see what it does. Okay, he's already made a mistake. When he auto-attacked the wave, that makes no sense. So, if he wants to play aggressive, how does he do that? Well, he keeps the wave in the middle of the lane so he can actually fight me right. By hitting the wave more than he needs to, he's just pushing the wave into me quicker.
Garen's mistake was not imagining the stop sign before he decided to hit the wave. If he had stopped to think, should I hit the wave here, Garen himself could have prompted conscious thought, allowing himself to identify that hitting the wave obviously doesn't follow his game plan. When driving, people have driven for thousands of hours, and absolutely everyone's guilty of autopiloting when driving, just like hitting minion waves. Thankfully, with driving, there's a lot of guidance in the form of signs on the road that prompt conscious thought to keep you safe. The most notable of these signs is, of course, the stop sign. The stop sign instructs the driver to bring the car to a complete stop. With that stop, they can then gather information from their surroundings in order to make the best possible decision for when they should continue driving. Stop signs are strategically placed in hotspots where extreme caution is required. In League, there's no such system. You need to identify these hotspots yourself, and self-enforce the process of stopping, looking, and thinking. Let's see how Hector implements the stop sign rule into his own play, and you can also participate in this process as we go along to get you practicing for the real thing, so buckle up. Oh, and by the way, we just created a brand new custom course specifically for this strategy at skillcap.com. It's there you can unlock an additional 8 site-exclusive guides where our Skillcap Challenger experts Hector and McBays walk you through exactly how to implement this stop sign strategy in solo queue. Find out more along with the discount code at the end of this guide. Now, back to the video. Here Hector's on Jax versus another Garen. Much like how you would have an end destination in mind on the road, you should also have an idea for how you think your top lane matchup should play out, even if it's just a very basic matchup plan, as this will allow you to come up with a plan for how you want to manage the minion waves. Let's listen in.
I just win extended trades, right? Like, if a fight starts around here, I mean, I can just chase the Garen down and just outvalue him with lethal tempo and my passive. Like, he cannot match the damage that I'm doing with that. But if the wave's around here, I can't really hit Garen that much.
To summarize, Hector always wants to make sure that the wave is far out in the lane so he can chase Garen down, right? Knowing that will make it much easier to make later decisions. Let's watch what happens. As lane starts, Garen actively forces a fight onto him. Sadly for Garen, this is one of the big lane losing mistakes lower elo players make. They simply don't think about the matchup and what the other player wants to do. Garen is literally giving Hector exactly what he wants, an extended trade. Without flash, Hector has no way to immediately kill Garen, so his enemy gets a small amount of respite before Jax gets level 2 to get Q. Unfortunately for Garen, he couldn't regenerate enough health during that small time window, and he's completely forced out of lane this time. It should go without saying that Hector has got a massive lead now, and just needs to make moves to guarantee it. And this is the type of hotspot you need to keep in mind for when you need to stop. There are certain moments that you should almost always stop to think about what you're doing before you make a mistake. Some examples of hotspots would be things like when you're warding and decide where you need vision the most, or after a recall to decide what lane you should go to, or as you hit a tower to decide how long you'll actually hit it for. Or in this case, anytime you force your opponent out of lane, you should have time to stop and look to think about how to proceed, since you don't really have much else going on. Early on, when you force people out of lane, the biggest punish you can do is setting up a freeze. That way, your opponent misses a ton of farm as they slowly make their way back to lane. Not only is a freeze good for punishing Garen here, but if you remember, it goes along perfectly. He wants the wave closer to this side of the lane for extended trades. After the all-in, notice that instead of autopilot hitting the wave, Hector moves back and stops to think about what he's going to do. He arrives at a very unusual conclusion about this melee minion. What do you think he might do or not do in regards to the minion right now?
I'm actually not going to last hit this on purpose, and I know that sounds really stupid, but if I last hit that, those minions aggro onto me, and I think the wave might not freeze if I do that.
Let's make something clear real quick. It isn't a hotspot every single time you hit a minion. It's only when doing so would drastically change the status of the wave. For example, if you converted a freeze into a push, or a slow push into a fast push by hitting the wave. Intentionally missing a last hit is not a decision a lot of players would make, and never in a million years could that decision be made when on autopilot. But it's all possible when just taking a moment and thinking about what's important. Hector already knew from the get-go that setting up a freeze is really valuable, which allowed him to make this decision after a bit of deliberation. This is the equivalent of making a dangerous left turn when you see a car incoming. You could take the risk and potentially make the left before it crashes into you, or you could just wait and let the car pass before turning. Likewise, there's a chance that walking up to score this last hit wouldn't break the freeze, but the risk of that happening wasn't worth it. The freeze is so good to extending his lead that giving up a single last hit is fine in the grand scheme of things. Just take a look at the lane state when Garen gets back from basing. Hector is already a full level ahead, with so much extra experience to get. It should go without saying that even without Shaco's help, this lane was already over. If this gank hadn't come through, he just waits for the wave to crash, gets level 4, and fights Garen with a 2-level lead. There isn't an emergency break strong enough in the world that would save Garen from that disastrous of a start. Moving on to our second example, we've got Hector on Jace. Now, there's a very important rule that every North American player should follow when playing Jace. Let's listen in.
I am not the greatest Jace. I mean, I may as well be the living embodiment of NA Jace, but I think with good fundamentals, this is just not even going to be like hard.
This is why Hector earns the big livable wage bucks here at Skill Capped. Making excuses beforehand about your mechanics on Jace is pivotal to prevent yourself from tilting when you inevitably look horrible on the champion. As the lane begins, Hector autos the wave once. This is a good habit to build in ranged versus melee matchups. During the first wave, all 3 melees will usually die at the same time. Auto-attacking one of them once makes it so that you won't have to use a spell to score all the last hits as they get low. And saving your spell is obviously important so that you can actually harass your melee opponent.
Okay, like I said, living embodiment of NA Jace. Ooh, my spacing there? Awful. But she's up.
We'll do everyone a favor and spare you from the million excuses he gives afterwards about why his mechanics are so bad. But right after the kill, this is a hotspot moment in regards to wave control. What would you do here to solidify your lead? You'll need to hold that thought while we watch what happens. Hector has to stop mid-thought as he realizes what he needs to do in this situation.
So generally, on the first wave, Aurelia can, get her fully stacked passive by... Hold on, let me explain in a second. I'm about to do something important here. Gonna run through the tower, tank these minions. I should have just let myself die. Dying is actually faster. I trolled. Dying is better there. I don't know why I lived.
So that was a really great move Hector did, demonstrating his wave control knowledge that allows him to climb despite awful mechanics. The point of this move was to drag the incoming enemy wave to keep it from preventing his own wave from crashing into the tower. This allowed him to base with the wave pushing back into him. But he actually did this because he messed up his decision making. Going back, of course, no one could have predicted what Hector chose to do from this moment where we asked you what you would do. That's because he was autopiloting, trying to commentate, and didn't apply the stop sign rule. If he had, then he wouldn't have needed to use that tactic to correct his mistake. After getting a kill, it's obviously almost always best to either crash the wave or freeze to take a recall to spend your gold and heal up. The wave clearly can't be frozen from this position, so he needs to crash, right? This is where you need to stop for a moment and ask yourself, how do I make sure I can crash the wave from here? By literally looking left and right at oncoming traffic here, Hector could have realized that fast pushing probably doesn't get the wave in on time. If you answer that he should instead build a slow push here and wait for the next wave to fast push, then well done. Or if you came up with any other good solution, it's better than autopilot fast pushing like he did. If he hadn't been quick on his feet, the wave would have actually looked like this. Aurelia could easily get back to lane and pressure from this lane spot despite dying, and he could have easily lost his lead. Thankfully, Hector watched our advanced minion wave guide that teaches this great tip and many others to bring your wave control to the next level. Anyways, back to his efforts. Look at how the wave has formed when he gets back to lane. It's freezing towards him, which is obviously ideal.
So right now is not a good time for Aurelia to roam, but it is a good time for me to roam, as long as I don't die. If I don't die here, we're chilling.
Thanks to that prior wave control, he makes a move to help out his Lee Sin and even snipes away the blue buff. Not much later, the enemy Hecarim is complaining in all chat about top diff this game, which is always the main goal to achieve in any League game. After that Jace game, putting his mechanics in the spotlight, Hector immediately goes back to another easy right-click champion, Tryndamere. Exactly like the 2 previous games, Hector literally just all-ins his opponent at level 1 and scores a kill instantly. We may have to pull a U-turn on this guide and make it about how easy it is to kill everyone at level 1 in Elo, instead of learning how to manage minion waves, especially after what comes next. Darius teleports back to lane, and Hector just stands there baiting him with a recall. This is actually another hotspot for when you should stop and think about what to do. Players instinctively want to cancel their opponent's recalls, but it can often be beneficial to you to let your opponent base. In this case, if Darius just thought about it for a moment, he'd realize that recall was a bait. If Hector did go through with it, he could just freeze the wave and catch up on experience, while Tryndamere has to walk back to lane. The recall would be a massive mistake.
Okay, he's dead. I'm actually gonna level... Oh my god, how unlucky. He turned around. I just wanted to bait him there, and I leveled W just so I could slow him, but he turned around at the exact moment I pressed it, which is really annoying.
Just like before, he's got a massive lead early into the game, but anyone can do that. Now it's about making sure he keeps it so he can carry the game.
Okay, so my Warwick is top side of the map. Will he come to gank? I'm just gonna set up some deep vision while I can. Oh, we are not ganking. I mean, Darius is dead. Like, literally, he is dead right now. If my Warwick just came, but we can probably just be patient a bit. He'll eventually come, right?
The next step to punishing your opponents is always to think about what their own goals should be and stop to think about things from their perspective. In this example, we'll be hearing Hector's real-time thoughts on what Darius should be thinking about and what his mistakes will be as a result from autopiloting.
So he's getting a few auto attacks on me. What he is doing is pointless. So whenever he auto attacks me, it's fairly pointless. He should just be hitting the wave as much as he can to crash it. Because right now, the wave's in a horrible spot for him. Like, he's basically coin flipping the entire time that my Warwick isn't coming. He is actually quite lucky that my Warwick is just greeting for these jungle camps.
Normally, what Darius is doing isn't so bad, which is probably what he's autopiloting into doing so. But if he just stopped and thought for a moment, he'd realize why it's so bad. Why is the Tryndamere that just killed him twice playing passively and keeping a freeze rather than pushing aggressively? He also hasn't seen Warwick in a while. These kinds of thoughts would immediately pop into his head if he just actively thought about the game.
And I was kind of actually trying to bait him into hitting me, because hitting me is kind of pointless as well. I just have so much sustain that it just doesn't matter if he hits me a few times. Same thing, I'm just letting him hit me, maintaining the wave here. I'm baiting him to not hit the wave. And now he is dead.
Looking back, even if Tryndamere didn't know if he could push the wave in or not, if he realized that he was under threat of a gank, he could at the very least play back into this brush and just try to soak experience at a safe distance. Instead, he just falls further and further behind, making the game impossible for himself right from the get-go. And if you want to take your laning to the next level, then you need our brand new custom course specifically made for this strategy at skillcap.com.
So today we are going to talk about type systems, and I'm really excited about this because I've had a couple attempts at getting this topic ready. It's such a deep topic, and you can go all kinds of different directions with it. But I think we'll kind of see where we go today. But this is one that I put a lot of time to kind of researching and figuring out the best way to talk about it. The type systems are pretty cool. Whenever I first started programming, I learned some Portuguese. And so types to me at that time were, you're working with integers, you're working with strings, very primitive types. You're working with pointers and memory structures. And then later got into like C#, .NET, Java. You're working with objects and class types. And really that was kind of the world of the type system at that point. You have design patterns which kind of leverage some of the benefits of the type system. Whenever I got into functional programming, though, is when it really opened up my mind to how sophisticated type systems can be. So I started programming in Scala several years ago, and I was like, wow, there is a lot to learn about types that I didn't know before. So languages have come a long way since. And so today I would like to do kind of a high-level survey of what is a type system. And we're going to look at different type systems that are out there, and then slide into how does functional programming impact the design of a type system. So I'm going to start out by reading 3 quotes. I'm going to do something that you're not supposed to do in a live presentation and read from the slide, okay? I'm going to read 3 quotes about type systems, but they give us different facets about what a type system is, and I think they're important to understand. So first quote, a set of rules that assigns a property called a type to the various constructs of a computer program, such as variables, expressions, functions, or modules. These types formalize and enforce the otherwise implicit categories the programmer uses for algebraic data types, data structures, or other components. Okay. So I heard variables, functions, or modules, all right? So I think if most of us in here are comfortable with programming languages and general programming languages, we can kind of understand what's going on, right? Okay, now this next one. A type system is a tractable syntactic method for proving the absence of certain behaviors by classifying phrases according to the kinds of values they compute. Ooh. Okay, that one's a little deeper, all right? This one comes from a foundational book based on type theory called Types in Programming Languages. In fact, if you're interested in getting into type theory, that book is available online. It's considered kind of one of the de facto defining books about it. And this is where mathematics and logic systems begin to blend with computer systems. So it sounds very much like we're describing a proof. So if you're common with a mathematical proof, the idea that a type system can correlate with mathematical proofs, and so you can write programs that are therefore provable. All right, so that's the angle that this is taking. And then lastly, this isn't necessarily a definition of a type system, but it describes what is important for a type system. Intuitively speaking, you want your type system to induce a system of logic that is consistent. That is, doesn't allow false theorems to be proven. The more inconsistent the system of logic induced by the type system is, the less useful the type system is to proof of correctness of the code. In other words, the more strict, sophisticated type system you have, the more consistent output you're going to get. And then the opposite is true as well. So I think this quote is one of the reasons we should study type systems and understand and utilize the type systems whenever we build things. In my first talk a long time ago, I talked about how we as software developers are builders, right? We're not syntactic experts, we are builders. We're building things. And so the more we understand about how to build things and build things better, the better we will be at our profession and what we do. So what are the goals of a type system? Some of these are pretty obvious, right? We want to check for bad behavior. We want to do that as early as possible so that we learn about the problems in our program at the time of writing the program and not having our users do it. We want to enable abstractions. So I don't want to have to talk to the computer in ones and zeros. I would like to use integers and strings. I'd like to use objects. I would like to use expressions. All right, so the type system enables me to do that. And also, it provides documentation. The more sophisticated type system you have, the more documented your code is going to be, because the code is going to represent the truth, right? When you add code comments, and that's your primary mode of documentation, it's easy for that to drift over time or be inconsistent. Maybe the code comments captured the developer's perspective of what's going on, but it may not really be what's happening. So a good type system also helps you self-document your code better. Okay, question to all. What are some of the things that we do to evaluate if we're going to use a programming language? I'm going to open this up to the floor. What are some ideas? When you're evaluating to use a particular programming language, what are some of the things that you look for? Community. Very good. What else? Flexibility. Solves the type of problem we're trying to solve. Speed. Okay, so how approachable is it? Yeah, this is the list I came up with. The very first thing you're probably going to do is you're going to evaluate the domain of the language. All right? Is this a language that solves the problems I'm trying to solve? If I'm going to write a web page or client-facing logic, I'm probably not going to choose C++. All right? People do that, but you're probably not going to choose that as your first choice. You're probably going to choose from a language in the JavaScript family, because that is the domain that language was created for. If I'm going to do intensive data processing, asynchronous operations, I'm probably not going to choose JavaScript, okay? Because that's not the domain that language is written in. So the first thing you're probably going to look at is the domain the language fits in. The second thing is community. So whenever I got the domain and I got a family of languages, we all know there's those languages that are experimental, they're really cool looking, but there's 5 guys in a garage that use that language and maintain it, right? So you're going to probably choose a language that has a large community, a lot of experts, they're going to blog about it, they're going to put a lot of documentation out there, okay? And I'm going to argue this third point is type system. Okay, we might favor certain syntax, but really it's the type system next that we're going to care about. What does the language offer us as a building tool? If you get anything from this talk today, this is the one thing I want you to get. The more you use your type system, the more it works for you. Right? If you use your type systems primitively. Don't expect anything beyond primitive behavior from your type system. So if you use rich types and rich type system features to describe your domain, then you'll find your type system actually enforcing your domain. And I think that's very important. Okay, so I'm going to set a few expectations here of what we're going to do. We're only going to scratch the surface, and I'm not going to get super deep in the type theory. We're going to bounce on it, but we're not going to go super deep here, okay? There is a lot when you start studying types that you can go into. There are books and books. There are PhDs that get into this. So we're just going to scratch the surface, and we're going to make it relevant to software development. I am a Scala developer. I am comfortable in Scala, so any code you see is going to be in Scala. However, I am not going to use anything that is outside of the standard library. I'm not going to use anything that is easy to understand, and also specific to Scala. So what I'm saying in Scala today is also applicable in Haskell, F#, and a lot of the other languages we use. Okay, so I'm going to keep this very as language agnostic as possible, but I got to be able to speak in something. All right, so we're going to start today with fundamentals. All right, so just the basics. Most basic type systems support these three things: type safety, static versus dynamic type checking, and type inference. When we're talking about type safety, a safe language is one that protects itself from its own abstractions. All right? So let's think about safe versus unsafe behaviors. C++, I'm going to pick on it for a minute. Very unsafe language. All right? In C++, I can dereference null pointers. I can access arrays out of bounds. I can return memory locations out of a function that don't belong to the scope of the function. I can use uninitialized variables. I can also, at will, cast between and reinterpret memory addresses into different data types, right? That is very dangerous behavior. In fact, it's not going to be something caught at compile time. And at runtime, you're not going to get an exception. It's going to crash your program, or worse yet, open you up to exploits. All right? The last one is me poking at JavaScript. It doesn't check parameter lists. So when you get to a function, you have no idea what was passed into that function or how many parameters. Right? So these are unsafe behaviors. And on the other side, safe behaviors are languages that are going to catch exceptions. We're going to disallow uninitialized variables. At compile time, we're going to check parameter lists. We're going to check types. Okay? Those are safe operations. Now, when we are evaluating a language, it's not a binary characteristic, right? It's not that this language is unsafe and that this language is safe. There are aspects of the language that favor safety, all right? So it's kind of a lot of shades of gray, you know, memory safety, abstraction safety, runtime safety. All right, this one. Static versus dynamic type checking. Static type checking. We verify the program is safe before execution. Dynamic, we're going to do it at execution time. All right, so question to the audience. Why do we get in so many religious arguments about static versus dynamic checking? I'm trying to be a troll. Don't swing for it. All right, more seriously, pros and cons of static versus dynamic type checking. This is a serious question. Exactly. Yeah, so so pretty much this. Aaron summed that up very well. So essentially with static type checking, you're going to get very early feedback if there's problems in your code. You're going to get more optimizable code because less guesswork has to be done at runtime. But you're going to have to annotate your code a lot more, and that test compile cycle is going to be a little bit longer. Now, dynamic type checking, on the other hand, It's very quick, on your feet, off the cuff. You can do a lot of different type introspection. You get duck typing. It looks like this. You can change things at runtime. It's fantastic for prototyping. But you're also going to have to write a lot more unit tests to do things that a statically type system would check for normally, right? You don't want to be at runtime and not have any unit tests, and it turns out you're getting crazy types passed around everywhere. They're really for different kinds of applications. You got to think about that. Here are just some languages that are static versus dynamic. I think most of us are probably familiar with a lot of these. So I'm not spend too much time here. Okay, this last one I threw in just because I don't feel like it'd be complete if I didn't mention it. Strong versus weak typing. The community generally says this is a very bad description because it's very unclear what it means. But essentially, my ability to reinterpret type of a variable at runtime. All right, so in a static, strongly typed language, I'm not going to, once I assign a variable a value, I can't change the type of that value. Whereas, like if I'm in C++, I can change it. I can reinterpret past that memory address into something else, or I can use unions or other things that let me do that. JavaScript, whatever, whatever, whenever. All right. Yeah, so you get the idea. Okay, so again, shades of gray. It's kind of all over the place, and languages cover these in different areas a little bit differently. Okay, and then last one of the basics I want to talk about is type inference. This is a benefit of statically typed systems where I don't have to annotate all my types explicitly, but they can be inferred based on what's on the right. Okay, so down on the left, you can see I put types at the end of my variables. And on the right, I didn't put any types, but the compiler is able to figure out what that is. Okay? That is still a feature of static typing language. A lot of people confuse that with dynamic typing. It's different. This is static typing still. It's done prior to execution, but it's just the compiler is being super smart and figuring out what I got. The biggest benefit of this is, and we as functional programmers know this, is that whenever you're doing functional programming, you don't have to tell the computer how to do every little step of something. So for instance, when I'm in an imperative programming language and I'm doing a loop, I have to describe exactly how that loop is going to work. All right? I have to have a counter, I have to have an increment, and I've got to kind of follow through there. In functional programming, we like expressions. So what is it that I want done? And I'm going to let the compiler figure out how to build that. Okay? Type inference is a nice advanced feature that lets us get there. Okay? And then one last thing about this, type-driven development. Whenever you have a really powerful type system, you can write programs with just the types. Okay? The functions and the type signatures. At Osberg, where I work, whenever we write a new microservice, it's not uncommon for us just to write functions and types, the entire microservice, before we provide any implementation at all. And then, once it compiles and we understand that the overall structure of the code looks good, then we'll fill in the itty-gritty details about how those functions are going to be accomplished. But because we're using a strict programming language, I know that if I have that input mapped to an output, that whenever it compiles, it's probably going to work. All right? So that's type-driven development. Okay, how are we doing so far? That's just kind of the basics. Even general purpose programming languages are going to support that. Probably nothing really groundbreaking. All right. So let's go down a layer deeper to the richer features of a modern type system. Okay. Now this one a lot of us are probably already familiar with, but functions as types. These are called higher order functions. And what a higher order function means is that I can pass a function into another function as an argument, or I can return a function from another function, okay, as the return type. So in this example, I'm assigning to a variable a function, all right, using an anonymous function, but I'm saying y is going to be an integer, and that is going to yield another integer. It's going to yield y plus 100. So I can call x, passing in 50, and I'm going to get 150. So integer to integer, all right? In this example, I'm going to define a function where in the formatter position, it's going to take another function as its input. So I'm going to pass in a sequence of integers, and then I am going to pass in a formatter that's going to take an integer and return a string, and that whole function returns a string. So it's going to loop through that list of integers, and it's going to run it through that formatter to generate strings and then concatenate that all together. So you can see I'm going to define f as taking an integer, and then I'm going to call that format function, and I'm just going to pass f right into it. And I'm going to get that result at the bottom. All right, so that's higher order functions. This is kind of the rage these days with programming languages, because a lot of programming languages that did not start with higher order functions are starting to adopt them now. So, C# supports these, Java's beginning to support these. Most of the functional programming languages already support this. JavaScript supports this. You get the idea. This is an example using a technique called partial function application occurring. Now this is syntax that's a little bit more specific to Scala, but Haskell does this very well. In fact, this is the only way to pass multiple parameters in Haskell. But essentially what I'm doing is I'm going to have two parameter lists, and I can apply the parameter list at different points of execution. So I can start out and I can provide the prefix string to my greet function, which I'm doing there in the hello greet, kind of in the middle. And then later on, I can apply the second parameter list. Okay, that process is called curring. And then so there I have hello greet, and I'm going to call it once with Jordan. I'm going to call it again with Alex, and I get two different results at the bottom there. So it's just late applying parameters to the function. All right, switching gears. So the question is, what is the benefit of curring? There's different benefits. So if you're in a language like Haskell, for instance, that's just kind of the way that you do it, right? So all of your functions are going to take one parameter, and you essentially, every time you invoke it, you're going to get another function that expects the next parameter until you get the result. When you study category theory, that is actually very natural with how category theory handles mappings for categories. But more pragmatically, it is kind of a way of doing dependency injection for your functions, if you want to think about it that way. So let's take the example where you want to make a call to a database, and you want to pass in something that's you might want to pass in the connection string of that database before you do your call, because you want to do injection on your configuration. But you don't want to have to do that all the way down at the point that's needed. So what you can do is you can pass in like that config type early on in the program, and that's going to give you a function that's going to talk to the database that already has that baked into it. So then later on in your code, you can call it with the filter value, and it's already got that other one in place. So then it'll run. So it kind of helps you from having like these really long parameter lists. You can kind of build it up over time. That's one example. There's several others, but that's kind of like a immediate practical one. All right, so let's talk about conditionals. Have you guys ever seen this? People online talking about how if statements are evil. Does anybody want to take a bat as to why if statements are considered not great? You got to cover all the cases. Yeah. So exactly. Zach first. A lot of times they don't return a value, so you're not going to guarantee the output from that conditional body. Dylan? Exactly. So for testing, you have a lot of different conditions to check for, and so that's just more things to test. And so you gotta check. Any others? Yeah, that's pretty good. If conditions are completely loose, right? You can say if something else is another predicate, else is another predicate. But those predicates don't have to be related to each other, right? You can have something that logically makes sense in the first predicate, and then the second check, you know, maybe it makes sense, maybe it doesn't. There's no enforcement by the type system. So it would be really nice if we had native support for controlling that from our type system. So there's something that we have called algebraic data types that is one solution to this. Now, my Haskell people are going to say, well, wait a minute, algebraic data types are more than that. So let's kind of break this down. An algebraic data type is a variant type that supports sum and product algebras. All right, and it's going to let us do pattern matching on that. So what I mean is there's two things an algebraic data type lets us represent. Sum, meaning I can have an A or a B, but not both. And then there's the product, which says I can have A and B together. All right, now that's the conceptual definition of an algebraic data type. Let's break that down a minute. Product algebras look like this. This is stuff we know. A tuple is an algebraic data type of a product algebra. In other words, I have two types that come together. So in that first case, I have an int and a boolean. They come together as a package deal. And then the range of tuples I can support is all of the possible values for an integer combined with all the possible values of a boolean. Okay? Classes, it's the same thing. At the bottom, I'm packaging together two different data types with that class. And that class, the range of supported values is going to be whatever I can put in an integer and whatever permutation I can put into a string, which is a lot wider. All right? Here's the more interesting one, though. Sum types. A or B, but not both. So if you have been in functional programming at all, or you've seen any of our other talks here, we talk about like the option type. And you'll remember that option type is like it's like a base class, and usually you have a sum or a none. We're talking about the same type, and I can use them interchangeably, but the specialized version means two different things. I got either this or this, but not both at the same time. That's also true with the either, or sometimes called a disjunction. I got a right or a left, but not both. Or like a try type. This is more specific to Scala. I have a success or a failure. All right. So that's what an ADT lets you do. But the really cool thing about ADTs is you can do pattern matching on them. So instead of writing a bunch of if-else statements, you can pattern match on all the combinations, and the type system will enforce if you've covered all the cases. And if you haven't covered all the cases, you'll get a compiler warning. All right, so you can see in this example, we have an error as the subtype, or I'm sorry, the supertype, and then you got argument, parser, and runtime error that both derive from that. Each of those takes slightly different shapes in the structure. Down at the bottom, I have an argument error instance, and then I can do a pattern match. I can say, okay, if that thing is an argument error, then handle it that way. If it's a parse error, handle it this way. If it's a runtime error, handle it this way. And if I leave off any of the cases, I'm going to get a compiler warning. It's going to say, hey, you're presenting something. You need to go fill that in because we don't know what's going to happen when we do that match. Okay? Any questions there? Dylan? Yes, so if you're in Scala, the sealed keyword is essentially the thing that's going to define that all of these types are together and it can't be further modified outside of that scope. In other words, you're not going to have a code file, some add in other extensions to make your match. That's more of a Scala. If you're familiar with C++, that might resemble an enum type. Enums, those are really just integers under the hood. Type system's not going to do a whole lot for you there. These are a lot more sophisticated because it's actually the shape of the type itself. All right, polymorphism. Anybody want to guess? How many types of polymorphism are there? I'm not sure anybody wants to say it. All right. Yeah, okay. So there's three kind of main types of polymorphism we talk about. So most of us are probably familiar with what we call subtype polymorphism. So what that allows you to do is you have like classic examples when you're using object-oriented intelligence. You got a base type, so let's say we've got a shape type, and you've got specialized versions of that shape, triangles, squares, circles, and then each of those can give you like a and so I don't care what specific type I have. I can call dot area, and I can get back whatever that specialized type returns me. That's polymorphism on a subtype level. Let's look at the other two a little bit. Okay, kind of already pulled the beans on that one. Well, actually, let's define this. Why do we use polymorphism? So it's going to unify a lot of different. It's going to abstract over behaviors. Exactly. So I can have a bunch of specialized types, but they all be unified and treated as the same based on common behaviors between them. Okay, so let's look at parametric polymorphism. Well, that's it. Okay, this is very similar. If you use C# or Java, this should be very familiar to you. Okay, essentially, this is the ability to say, I'm going to have a class, an object type, that supports some other data type in it. So a very classical example is a list of T. I don't care what T is. I don't care if it's a list of integers. I don't care if it's a list of strings. I want to support just a generic list of things. And I'm not going to do anything with those things, but otherwise just manage the whole lot of them, right? So this syntax is probably similar if you're like in C# or Java. It's going to be angle brackets, but you get the idea. This is just straight up generics, okay? That's parametric polymorphism. So in this example, we're modeling vehicles, and at the top we have an interface or a trait called the thing. We have vehicle, car, jeep, motorcycle, and randomly thrown in a vegetable. And so you can kind of see how those all derive from each other. And then we're going to have a class that represents parking. It's going to take a type into it. We don't know what type, but it's going to take a type. Now, if I create a parking that expects a motorcycle type, then I have to pass in a motorcycle to that. If I try to pass in a car, it's not going to compile because that is an instance that is expecting the type motorcycle. But I can change my example, and I can say parking takes a car, and I can pass in a jeep because the jeep is a car according to the type. Type inference, so I'm not even going to specify a type here. I'm going to pass in two jeeps, and the compiler, the type system, can figure out I'm talking about a jeep. All right. Now, what do you think is going to happen if I take this exact same function, I put two different types in there? Let's do a jeep and a motorcycle. What's going to happen to that? Okay. Both, yes. So essentially, it's going to go to the nearest common type of vehicle. All right.
For thousands of years, people have attempted to create perpetual motion machines without success. The reason for this lack of success is, of course, that such a device would violate those pesky laws of physics. While early attempts at perpetual motion were for the sake of curiosity and invention, as well as to create interesting novelties, later attempts were more pragmatic in nature. If a device could be built that operated with greater than 100% efficiency, it would be a free source of renewable energy. Again, this almost certainly isn't possible, and the quest for perpetual motion is like the alchemic quest for the Philosopher's Stone. Despite all science pointing to it being an impossibility, the incredible magnitude of such a potential discovery is too much for many curious-minded individuals to resist. Today we're going to be looking at some of the most incredible attempts at perpetual motion. The Beverley clock resides within the Department of Physics at the University of Otago in New Zealand. The clock was created by Arthur Beverley, a man with very humble upbringings. Arthur grew up on a farm in Scotland, and at the age of 14 he became an apprentice watchmaker. He was quite skilled as a lens maker, and he began working with scientists after he made a set of microscope lenses for the University of Aberdeen. At the age of 30, Arthur moved to Australia during the Victorian gold rush. His efforts in the goldfields must have not been successful because he quickly went back to watchmaking. After a few more years, he moved on to New Zealand and opened his own watchmaking business in 1858. Just 6 years later, at the age of 42, Arthur would complete work on the Beverley clock. Once the mechanical clock was finished, Arthur wound it. That day in 1864 was the only time it was ever wound, and it is still running to this day, making it one of the world's longest running science experiments. So how could a mechanical clock run continuously for 158 years without being manually wound? Well, it actually hasn't. Though this clock is still running, there have been times when it has stopped. While the Beverley clock can theoretically run forever without being wound, it technically has an external power source, temperature. The clock is not a closed system and therefore not a true perpetual motion machine, but it's certainly the closest that we've ever got to one. The clock works because there is an airtight box inside it that expands and contracts throughout the day based on changes in temperature. This pushes on a diaphragm that lifts a 1 pound weight that winds the clock as it falls. As long as it's raised 1 inch each day, the clock will continue to run. All it takes to raise the weight, that 1 inch, is a change in temperature of 6 degrees over the course of the day. That's a very small change in temperature from the coldest point of the day to the hottest, but sometimes it just doesn't happen and the clock stops. Whenever the temperature fluctuates more, it will begin working again without needing to be manually wound, but it will still have lost time and will need to be adjusted. The Beverley clock is a brilliant design, and it was the first ever atmospheric clock, but it runs at less than 100% efficiency, and thus, of course, it's not a true perpetual motion machine, despite being an incredibly impressive feat of design. And because the clock is not a closed system and requires changes in temperature to power itself, it quite literally would not function in a vacuum. The previous attempt at perpetual motion couldn't work inside a vacuum, so here's a device that is a vacuum, or at least a partial vacuum. The device was created by British chemist and physicist Sir William Crookes in 1873. He was a pioneer of vacuum tube technology, so it's no wonder that he would be the one to create a vacuum-sealed perpetual motion machine. The Crookes radiometer looks a bit like a horizontal windmill trapped inside a light bulb. Despite the glass bulb being airtight and near a vacuum, the two-toned panels inside undergo a continuous rotation. Unlike most attempts at perpetual motion, which are deliberate efforts, often consuming the creator's entire life, Crookes' discovery was entirely an accident. One day, Crookes was trying to get extremely accurate measurements of weight on small samples for his chemistry work, so he wanted to weigh them inside a partial vacuum to reduce any interference on the measurements caused by air currents. While doing this, he noticed that the readings would change whenever sunlight shone directly on the balance. His radiometer was built as an experiment to test the phenomena that he had observed. There were several theories as to why the vanes would rotate, with Crookes' original guess being incorrect. It took 6 years before scientists finally arrived at the correct answer. The vanes each featured one black side and one silver side, all oriented in the same direction. Because darker colors absorb more heat than lighter ones, the black sides of the vanes would heat up when exposed to light. The air molecules inside the bulb that came into contact with the hotter black side would also heat up and become agitated, creating a force against the vanes. Because it was a near vacuum, there were enough air molecules to generate generate the force required to start the contraption spinning, but not enough for air resistance to overcome the force put upon the vanes. The sweet spot, where there is neither too little nor too much air to prevent the spinning motion, is fairly precise. While the initial Crookes radiometer was able to work by using vanes with one light side and one dark side, this was proven to not be necessary. In 2009, researchers at the University of Texas were able to replicate the effect using vanes that were all black, instead of relying on one color to make one side hotter than the other. It utilized curved vanes, whereas previous efforts had all used flat ones. Because of the curvature of the structures, the convex side of the vanes would heat up more than the concave side, thus creating the same effect. The Crookes radiometer has the ability to continue rotating forever without an internal power source, but once again, it is not a closed system and it requires external forces for its continued operation. Many light mills have been built since Crookes' original, though they serve little purpose outside classroom demonstrations or as a novelty. But if this is the sort of novelty that appeals to you, you can find them on Amazon for around $30. Yay. What makes this entry so incredible is less the idea itself and more that a respected scientist and inventor was absolutely convinced that this could work. Sir William Congreve was an inventor of some renown, enough renown to be knighted apparently. Among his inventions were a colour printing press and a new form of steam engine. Most notable of his inventions was a Congreve rocket, an early form of rocket artillery for military use. For an inventor of such ability, one would think he would have better things to do than focus on the fool's errands that is perpetual motion, but he didn't, at least at the end of his life. While recovering from an illness, Congreve drew up plans for a sponge-powered perpetual motion design. The most impressive thing about his design is that it took design elements from already disproven perpetual motion machines and combined them into one big soggy mess. His machine would combine the properties of an unbalanced wheel, a plank and chain, and the capillary effect. Individually, none of these ideas create a perpetual motion, but maybe, just maybe by combining a bunch of insufficient ideas, it would create something truly remarkable. The proposed machine featured a conveyor belt covered in sponges. On the outside of the sponges was another belt of heavy weights. The sponges would travel under the bottom of the machine through the water reservoir before being lifted onto the conveyor. Once on the conveyor, the weights would squeeze the water out of the sponges to make them lighter. At the top of the conveyor, a hose supplying water through capillary effect would soak the sponges again, making them heavy enough to drag the rest of the belt down. Now, if that sounds confusing and needlessly complicated, well, it absolutely is! Congreve never built the machine himself, nor did anyone else, as far as is known. Anyone with the ability to construct such a machine should immediately understand that it's not going to work, and they're relying on already disproven and failed methods of creating perpetual motion. Since Congreve designed this while recovering from being sick, it would be nice to just chalk it up to being some sort of fever dream, but no, he actually defended the idea. At his own expense, Congreve published a pamphlet to defend the principles behind the machine and put forward his belief that it would absolutely work. Perhaps this was just done to try and save face, but it is truly incredible that such an accomplished scientist and inventor would not only design, but then defend such a ridiculous contraption. The Oxford Electric Bell, also known as the Clarendon Dry Pile, is not what most people would think of when they think of perpetual motion devices. The reason is that it's operated by a battery. So why are we talking about it in today's video? Because the bell has been ringing almost non-stop for the last 182 years. The bell was constructed by instrument makers Watkins and Hill. It's believed to have been constructed in 1825, but there's no way to know for sure. What is known is that it was purchased in 1840 by clergyman and professor of physics Reverend Robert Walker, and it has been on display at Oxford University in England since then. It's located adjacent to the Clarendon Laboratory, hence the alternate name. The term dry pile comes from the type of battery used. It is the predecessor to the modern dry cell battery, and it is constructed by assembling a pile of discs of different alternating materials to create electrical charges. The Oxford Electric Bell has two dry piles, each above a bell to which it is connected. Between the two bells is a 4mm metal sphere that acts as a clapper. When the metal sphere comes into contact with one of the bells, it receives a tiny electrostatic charge that repels it, sending it to the other bell. This process has been repeated over 10 billion times since it's been on display. The apparatus is operated nearly continuously, with only small occasional periods of interruption resulting from exceptionally high humidity. It may not be perpetual, but how exactly has the Guinness World Record holder for most durable battery been able to remain fully functional for nearly 2 centuries? much longer will the bells continue to ring? The answer to both of these questions is we have absolutely no idea. There are no schematics or notes to indicate exactly what the battery is made out of. All we have is the device itself. The two dry piles are coated in a layer of molten sulfur to protect from atmospheric disturbances. This wax candles and batteries, and it makes it impossible to see the workings. There is speculation as to what materials the battery is made out of based on other contemporary research. However, there are no other existing batteries known to have run for nearly so long, so it would stand to reason that these batteries have something different about them. If you're wondering why researchers don't just disassemble the batteries to see what they're made out of, well, that would ruin the world's longest running experiment. Oxford University has waited 182 years for the bells to stop ringing, so surely they can wait a little bit longer. Or maybe a few centuries longer. We genuinely don't have any idea. On the bright side, the Oxford Electric Bell is now kept behind 2 layers of glass, so the ringing is virtually inaudible rather than being a constant source of insanity for Oxford students of physics. How incredible is this device, created in 2016 by YouTuber The Project One? Incredible enough to get nearly 4 million views. The machine is incredibly simple. It features a simple wooden frame placed on top of a wooden plank. The plank is then balanced on a wooden dowel, and 2 balls are placed inside the apparatus. You can then watch the seesaw rock back and forth as the balls roll from one end of the chamber to the other. According to the video, it works because the center of mass of the system is continually changing. Each ball pushes the opposite side of the board, causing the oscillation. This is, of course, a complete and total fabrication. How it actually works is by either strings or, more likely, pistons connected to the bottom of the plank that can actually be seen in the video itself if someone is looking carefully. The seesaw rocks in perfect rhythm regardless of the actual position of the balls. Incredibly, despite being an obvious hoax, many people who saw the video believed it was a real machine. Quite possibly, millions of people did. The appeal of what it being real could mean is too much for our rational brains to overcome, even when the true explanation is right in front of our eyes. The simple fact is that true perpetual motion machines will never exist. Devices like the Beverly clock and the Crookes radiometer show that it is possible to build a machine that can harness outside forces to power itself, but those forces still need to exist. There will never be a closed system device that can run at 100% or greater than 100% efficiency, because it violates the laws of conservation. The United States government is so sure of this, as they should be, that the US Patent Office no longer accepts patent submissions for perpetual motion machines. If you'd like to learn more about that, you can find the 1940s short Something for Nothing featuring cartoonist and inventor of wacky and impractical devices Rube Goldberg discussing patents and the impossibility of perpetual motion devices, and also discussing how great and limitless fossil fuel is, because somebody had to pay to get that video made, I suppose, and well, somebody was probably the automotive industry. And this video was brought to you by the auto. It wasn't, but I do hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Has been slain.
and welcome to the Best Junglers episode, this one for patch 13.1 and the first of season 13. And with that has come a huge meta shift in terms of win rates and play rates and data and who was taken out back and who was propelled to the front. We will go over the best junglers for every single rank, including low and high MMR, and which ones you should use for your placements to really try and go for that 10-0 if you haven't already achieved it. Although I did release short form content already on the channel explaining how to best maximize your placements. But if you want the best champion data and builds and counters and everything you need to get through the season, Mobalytics is here to help. Much like our redesigned jungle, Mobalytics app has been redesigned to give you all of the best information that you need to thrive before, during, and after game. While Riot did remove scouting, Champ Select has been redesigned to give you all of the information on the champions on your team and on the enemy team so you can know which team is stronger, along with gold leads and insane informational trackers in the overlay. You can keep track of your progress in-game to help you hit the targets you need to win. The power spike notifications in-game will mean you never have to worry about messing up again. Leona 6, Roman gank it. Nocturne 6, don't over push and dive. And so you know ADCs need this, but you know what? They're not going to use it, which means you can use it and then counter gank and obliterate the enemy jungler. The brand new Mobalytics app has everything you need to improve in Season 13 League of Legends. Click the link in the description below to download and become Ascended. Right, let's go onto the S tier page, and Maokai should be at the top, but I'm putting Sylas at the top because most people are just playing him wrong, and at the same time his play rate is kind of astronomical. The problem here lies with a very strong potent fighting champion and then people who can't reconcile their farming with their ganking. I've already made said video for season 13, you can go ahead and watch it, but if you're 5 camping with Sylas and going into the field with half HP, obviously you're not going to have the best success with your ganks and your scuttle fistings. Instead, you should look to chain together some more aggressive early clears and patterns in order to get yourself that snowball. Remember, once you get that Night Harvester, once you get, max rank W 5-second cooldown without haste, you will be utterly decimating the entire map with ease. The champion is still strong. Don't let the win rate misguide you, as it does with so many. You can't just look at win rates and player rates and be like, this is the reality. No, you have to interpret and contextualize everything. And on that note, yes, Sylas is absolutely busted. Go forth, kill everyone, scale into the night, and snowball with ease. How about that? We didn't even talk about the sustain, but on the note of sustain, Maokai has some, but that's not why he's so absolutely Turbo Astra broken. It's because his AP ratios are actually kind of nutty, and shifting that HP plus AP to that E scaling and having max HP on his Q, which we max to clear the jungle, means that his damage spike is coming online sooner. And because we can just auto attack after using spells to get some heal back, and our W is also point and click, everything is pretty straightforward in terms of engaging and dishing out the damage. The saplings and the bushes are going to do their work, not like back in season 7 when they were full AP, but definitely more than enough. Locked down for about 1800 years, the absolute easiest gank you've ever seen, and with Phase Rush or Aftershock as your choice, I did the Phase Rush, you can go in, unload your damage, sprint out, reposition, and then do it all again. Not to mention that of course now we can clear a little bit faster thanks to that newfound Q damage, and the Season 13 jungle is just looking absolutely primed for this tree. What they need to do is remove the damage profile from the rest of his kit, such that you can actually play him tank, which is what I prefer, but hey, he pretty much counters everything, so play this, win, get LP, enjoy it. Next up, we have the Deer, and this guy is still gonna run around and do the Demonics Embrace Phoenix W Jack Show kind of build, and yeah, he's not gonna have the same benefits from the Jack Show from a fighter standpoint, but of course when you're building tank, you're getting those bonus resistances on Jack Show, and thus the scaling for him as a tanky boy is definitely going to be better. That's because the bonus resistances from Force of Nature and your Frozen Hearts and whatever else you might want to go in that arena is going to directly benefit you for your drain tankage as well as your tankiness. And the Q-Max nerfs apparently have hit a little bit harder than a lot of us thought they would, although it is still something you can viably choose as a playstyle, but the win rate is nowhere near as good as your de facto Demonics Embrace Jack Show build path, and as such, you will have to decide your playstyle, but obviously, tankiness will reign supreme when you can farm and gank, secure objectives, and basically counter a lot of things that are quite irritating. Next up, we have Release, and in my OPS Plus builds video in December, I said, guys, Night Harvester is an absolutely loaded Giga stacked item, and it's really good at any AP champion that can viably build it. Despite the memes that have come forth from the high elo pro play scene, this was a fact of nature. You have the numbers, you can look at the numbers, and you kind of put it all together and you're like, that's a good package. However, at least still was not really quote-unquote in the meta or quote-unquote viable in the meta. At the same time, when win rate data was still good. And this was back in Season 12, but for Season 13, as of that video, her play rate has gone sky high, her win rate's gone even higher. She's basically a more controlled, easier to play Sylas in that regard, but at the same time, she's still difficult to execute properly. Fluidity of animations, tower dives, mechanics, aggressive jungle pathing knowledge. Yes, we do have the pets, which help us clear a lot faster. Yes, we have the passive gold income, which of course is again something that allows us to farm a little bit more. But when you take the most legendary level 3 245 top lane ganking jungler, you give her good itemization, you give her good scaling, you give her safety to fall back to clears when she needs to, quadrant clearing, you're gonna have an absolutely total package crazy jungler for the meta, which is what we have. And the reason she goes above Echo here is while Echo is still absolutely amazing at snowballing, he lacks the early potency, and at the same time, if you can see Seal Ghost Echo out before his ult is pressed, you can't count him. So you know at least things. While he does have the reset button, while he is still the kind of ranking king, basically it's going to be a little bit less influential early compared to your Silas, Maokai, and Elise, but we do have the ability to ramp up faster than they do. We do have the ability to go ahead of them in terms of snowball potential. Well, maybe not Silas, but it's close. And I've been saying this for months and months and months. I put Echo on these lists, his play rate is low. Finally, his play rate is going up to that 8-9% mark. Echo is your snowballing champion that won't be banned out. People will still not respect his E, not respect his W, not respect his ultimate. So essentially, they're going to complain about him, but it's within their power to do something about it. They just never ever do. Play Echo, you'll have fun, you'll win. Next up, we have Kindred, and of course, Kindred has been a top tier champion for quite a long time. Most people on high elo are aware of this. Yes, they are more difficult to execute, and you do again require that aggressive jungle pathing, those invades, but you can of course have way more clear versatility now than you ever could in the past. This means when you kind of knew Kindred was going to do one of two things, now they can do a whole bunch of different things, including for clearing if they want to. And that's kind of scary when it comes to those delayed invades, not being able to buy control with level 1, and for laners not understanding where exactly they're going to go first, versus just invading the enemy jungler. Good mechanics are required, good jungle pathing knowledge is required, good matchup knowledge is required in terms of your damage output, knowing exactly how far you can push the champion mechanically, being patient on your Q against things like Elise to avoid the cocoon, knowing when to use your E, knowing when to use your ultimate. These things come with time and practice. I've been coaching actually at Kindred for a while. He was a Wukong main at Platinum. We've spent the last 3 months focusing on Kindred, and I'm actually going to upload the coaching VOD to my coaching library in Rakayu.gg just now, so everyone can kind of observe this improvement over 3-4 months. I guess that's a lot of this S tier page, right? Good gankers, good aggressive junglers who also can now fall back to farming relatively well compared to how they could in the past, and so they're taking over. The same can be said for the beautiful lobby boy Zac, and you know, I don't have much to say about him other than Demonic's Embrace Jack show full tank, even stronger, just like Maokai, except Maokai doesn't even build that, which is hilarious. I mean, you can, but full AP is just better. And Zac obviously has the ganks, the full clears, the clapping people together, bringing people together nicely with his Q, healing himself with lobby passive to survive Giga dives. He is just such a great champion to main right. I'm not really gonna look at him. They're gonna nerf things like Maokai and Udius, but Zac will be eternal here. He is the new eternal best solo Q tank to main. Go ahead. And finally, we have Fiddlesticks, who should maybe be high, but I'm waiting to see if that 55%, that's right, win rate is really legitimate. Truly a unique champion for the time, something that Riot will always allow to exist. Again, great to main for that particular purpose. Full clears are still on the cards. And now we're gonna have a slight turn on the corner of A tier page, and you will see Belveth, the Void Queen, is actually here. I'm reluctantly saying that because Demex, the rank 1 EU West Belveth player, comes into my Discord and says, you better put Belveth on the list. And then he spams a no void emote. I don't know. To me, Rek'Sai is still the queen, and look, she's fine to play, but obviously not in the same tier as the Belveth. Giga Snowball, Giga Aggressive, Quadrant, 4.5 Camp, Herald, Snowball, Fishies, Reset, Healings, Positioning, Outplays, W hit, Scaling, E, Damage Reduction. Did I list everything? Maybe I missed something, but as you can see, total package destroys the meta. But isn't Ino as free as before? You do have to be slightly competent on the champion. She's still easy though. Next up we have Evelyn, another AP Queen Assassin, destroying, but destroying from the camouflage in the background and not really actually being at the forefront. And again, has good data, but I don't really want a non-Evelyn main playing Evelyn. Because you have to think so differently when you have permanent camouflage, you need the positioning, you want to understand your damage output perfectly for the amplification damage on that ultimate, and ensuring you can actually reliably hit Qs to, you know, get the bonus damage proc. Overall, she's just carrying on in the baseline in the background, and with more squishy champions running around or champions that are not building fully tanky, her burst is something that doesn't allow the Jack Show to get set up. No Jack Show resistance is set up, 3 kills for everyone. Next we have Master Yi, the classic 9k gold by 14 minutes champion extraordinaire. Just put that gameplay on my gameplay channel if you want to see it. Classically titled with a contemporary vibe, Get Rich with Master Yi. That's because he's the best gold scaler in the game, so if you can figure out a decent path for your strategy, aggressive or fallback, you can get your 6 or 7 CSPM, get 5 plates somewhere, get 5 plates somewhere else, get the Herald, you are almost guaranteed to pop off. And again, it's all about the alpha timing, the W timing, and not getting CC'd around those two spells. And don't forget, press E, right? 2 damage. Next, we have Graves, and again, win rate, play rate don't really look like something that's broken OP, but you take Canyon or take a good Graves play and say, I'm to challenger, they'll be able to do it. He is still the smooth operator, the jungle flow god, the map control counter jungling king. He will destroy you with every mistake you make, and with all these gankers in the game, not only will he make you poor by taking your entire jungle, he will shove eventually for counter ganks, and you'll be like, wait, why is he 2 levels ahead? Next up, we have Hecarim, and again, I'm putting him here reluctantly because half of you Hecarim players have no idea how to itemize. Why do I see 45% Ravenous Hydra Rush as the most pathetic? Come on, guys. Right below that, we have, oh look, Tear of Shoujo, 53% win rate. Right below that, do I see a 46% win rate Divine Sunbreath, you know, right above a Duskblade that has a 52% win rate. The itemization here is causing most of you to just ink this champion's win rate. The champion is strong, it's strong in the right hands. No, you cannot drool and run around like a tanky guy and do 1,000 damage a second while tanking 10,000 damage a second. You have to build more damage, you have to build more rotation, you have to use your W properly. But if you do itemize correctly, you do play to the champion's strengths, the new strengths since the rework, you will absolutely make this win rate go up if you just start itemizing correctly and playing to the champion's newfound strengths. Same thing here with Diana, the win rate isn't that great, but honestly that's a lot to do with build variations, and at the same time people not really maximizing your strengths. She is falling behind tempo a little bit, so make sure you're getting those counter ganks in and those level 6 ganks. Don't be roped into playing people's games, just play the Diana game, sequence properly, make sure you're scaling, get the 2 level leads. It's not gonna be sexy, but you can definitely play against these hyper ganking metas. And on that note, yes, we have Nunu and Willump next, running up and down the rivers, enjoying the newfound tankiness that they're getting from the itemizations. At the same time also one-shotting people with full AP. You've got the Aftershock, you've got the Face Rush, you have the options. Because we're seeing more ganking oriented champions, as you will notice from this list, he's just basically going, well, I'm actually the best at that, so you're gonna have to trail me and think about what you're gonna do next. And of course they don't, and you get ahead of the ganking tempo. Likewise, Night Harvester Nidalee. Sure, you can still rush the Lich Bane for your Giga Snowball, but Night Harvester is looking good on her. She loves the meta. What happens when you have a lot of ganking people in the meta and snowballing champions in the meta is that she basically goes, well, I actually do all of those things better. Yeah, I'm difficult to use, but I can full clear and counter gank and counter jungle, or I can do the ganking stuff myself also because I'm ranged. And then you go ahead and push the enemy jungle out of their jungle, you get a couple kills, you take all their camps, and now you have a 3-level lead. I mean, it's easier said than done, but she's essentially the epitome of the most difficult champion to snowball and control early games. But if that's the kind of meta we're in, she's gonna be good. And next up, we have the low elo page. You can see the Amumu absolutely dominating thanks to the Jack Show adjustments. We also have the Maokai destroying. You can obviously go to Monix Jack Show here as well if the full AP is too nuanced and kind of fluffy for you. And I've actually added the Amumu to my live companion guide, so I'll link that below as well. Mordekai's are still supreme here, not really overall, but definitely great here. They finally fixed that passive bug. And obviously the Warwick and the Lily are specifically good in low elo, but you can use them all the way to Diamond Plus, no stress. They are also doing extremely well overall. High elo is an interesting one because Sylas should be on the list, and we all agree Sylas should be on the list, but then his win rate is like 45% despite being the most played. He's not having as much success in high elo as he is for the gem pop at the moment. Obviously still great to play. The thing is you have things like the Maokai, which he does kind of want to counter, but at the same time Maokai's just one-shotting everyone, so it doesn't matter. The rest should obviously make sense, but what's interesting is the success of the play rate and win rate of Rengar and Wukong. Not picks that we're gonna say are necessarily, hey look, these are the best things you can possibly play in high elo, but they are doing a good job with those who play the champion and main the champions and understand their position relevant to all the other ones that they're seeing most often. As long as you understand your champion enough to navigate the meta that surrounds you, to amplify your strengths, to mitigate your weaknesses and punish theirs, then you can always make anything work in high elo. It's just about the pilot issue and understanding of the game. And there you have it, the 13.1 patch with weird champions dominating, Mundo and Ramus taken out back apparently. Please rebuff them. And don't forget, if you hate all of these champions and want to counter them, I've made a total Bible counter guide A to Z, and that's linked on your top right.
My motivation.
Much appreciated.
My armor stats? Yeah, sure, I can show them for you, my dude. Probably. Oh, no, they don't have a Black Cleaver. Wait. Did Lulu AFK? Yep, she did. I have no idea how Jack shows stacks with my ult. Well, I mean, I'm assuming it does. I don't know if it like, yeah, I don't know if like afterwards if you get the AD on your ult. Can't say for sure. I have no idea. Fucking, it was basically a 2v5 at the end of the day. It was basically a 2v5, right?
Curtis. Okay, there we go. Wait, what is this group Patscraft? Woo! Okay, this one's got the feats.
Dude, I have not climbed it all night. This has been a complete waste of my day. Well, at least I still have another 10 hours. Okay. Who bans Renekton? Yasuo? Ribbon? Huh? Huh? Jax is OP and everyone knows about it, Hash. I agree. Yeah, no, I agree.
Ripples everywhere, dude. What do I do with those fucking ripples? I just throw them on the ground. That's
Welcome to Summoner's Rift. "30 seconds until minions spawn.
Alright, alright, alright.
As much as I wish, a single head can't hold counsel. So please.
This one's fine though. This matchup is fine. What? I haven't gotten to ban Riven since December 2015. When Riot decided that spammable percent HP true damage was fine on a champion. Oh my god, Kitty, you're killing me. Okay, I understand. You want your...
The desert was my mentor.
This matchup can be a bit bad in the early game, but I figured out a strategy for dealing with most of the champions who spam all in me. What you do is you just push the wave, and then they get like mad because you've pushed the wave. Or they just randomly walk up and take a full hit to the face. Yeah, sure. Hello, Foffy. That... Wow. What? Why is he just eating everything? And now you're holding the wave? But now you're losing even more HP.
First blood.
Foffy, did you look into that game that Hildrick was trying to pitch to me?
Surrender.
An enemy has been slain.
Ah, yes. Eid forward, animation cancelled it, so the auto attack came out instantly, then flashed away, so she only got hit by one turret shot despite being stunned under turret. Ah. Okay. No. It was really loud. Riven Z is not the same as Kosante Z because Riven can animation cancel into and out of her Q.
Anyone can wield a weapon. Warriors.
Hold on. What was that game? Hildrick, are you in here? Hildrick was pitching it. He probably went to sleep. It's like a 6-player turn. Let me look this up. Just so, it's like a 6-player turn-based simultaneous game. RPG thing. He put it on Discord. Let me go look this up. I haven't looked into it because I have to play a shitload of League, you know, for the viewers. Stolen Realm. It's only got 1,000 reviews. Oh, it's one of these. Yay.
I am not dead. Not yet.
Shut down.
Stolen Realms is fun? Well, I mean, For the King was fun. Is it anything like For the King?
We were friends.
I'm kind of getting For the King vibes off it.
Some hunts fail. Some love stories too.
What's my jungler doing? I mean, he's getting shit done in other lanes. I don't care about losing my lane so long as people win their lanes. Cause like I can take like I don't give a shit. I'm playing a tank, right? My champion skills well, but my items are pretty cheap.
Those who don't respect will learn. Ascended warlords, monsters. They are not so different.
Okay, he blew his ignite. Let's go check. Yep, that's what I figured. I don't think multiplayer XCOM would be very fun. Because, like, most of what you do in XCOM is actually extremely generic. Shoot enemy! Like, can you imagine playing multiplayer XCOM? Is it my turn, guys? Is it my turn? Yay! You, like, right-click. Yay! That's it. That's your turn. You just right-click the shoot enemy button.
An enemy has been slain.
Yeah, if you play a multiplayer turn-based game, there needs to be some, like, choices are the big deal. You need choices. Okay, but did you guys like the part where I canceled all his abilities in a row? Into punting him over the wall, into blind Q3 hit, into escaping their jungler. Mid laner. But why? Okay, here's what I don't understand about situations like that. If their mid laner was coming top, why would she take the trade? And if she was going all in, why would the mid laner be going top? Multiplayer Kenshi would actually get boring as fuck. Can you imagine making those long distance runs at 1x speed? I do agree that a multiplayer styled Kenshi could be decent, actually, but you would need to ensure that there was like shit to do while you were traveling. Otherwise you end up with, well, to be honest, DayZ. Yeah, can you imagine? Jet, can you imagine playing like multiplayer Kenshi? It literally takes you 2 hours of time in real life to move.
An ally has been slain. Welcome to Summoner's Rift. Seconds until minions arrive.
All right. Today is, what is it? January 12th. The days keep rolling, folks. What's going on here? Next thing you know, we're dead. But anyways, this is a recap for the stock market activities today. But folks, I got a good one for you tonight. Let's start by this. It is one thing to talk about the CPI and how to trade the CPI beforehand. Let's say a few days before it takes place, a few weeks before the release. And it's another when you're seeing it right in front of you pre-market and you're strategizing before the bell. Take for example what happened today. I was not tweeting, but what is it? Discording. I was in Discord as the CPI was going out. And by the way, you might ask, how do I get your Discord, Maverick? The answer is it's a membership perk. And I know what you're gonna say, hey Maverick, but you're charging too much. What's up with this inflation? Show me which other YouTuber puts money back in your pocket. That's number one. Number two, ask any of your favorite content creators, and they'll tell you YouTube is killing us. The pay is down by more than 50%. And the reason is they want us to do these stupid shorts. All the money's now in shorts because they want to be another TikTok, which is absolute stupidity. And I refuse to participate in this de-evolution of humanity. Got attention problems? The show's too long for you? Go to TikTok. Now that we've lost half of the viewers, let's go over what I said in the morning today in Discord. As the CPI came out, 6.5% named vanilla cooked, of course. Everybody knows inflation is double digits territory, even with the drop in music prices, even though it's the race, groceries, eggs, etc. But it doesn't matter. They pay you whatever they use. It doesn't matter. They gave us 6.5% plain vanilla. And immediately I got three charts right in front of me. Chart number one, the most important one, is the dollar. Chart number two is oil, whichever you want, Brent, WTI, doesn't matter. Chart number three, the NASDAQ futures, and one should be action tick by tick. What am I seeing? I'm seeing the dollar looking down. In other words, the market is saying, oh, this is good news because the Fed is going to 25, so 50, the Fed is going to cut rates. It doesn't matter what the market says. We play with whatever the market feeds us. Even though the market is wrong, they're going to be exposed wrong in the long run, down the road. Right now, talk about that in a minute, but 5:50% of the time, about 40 minutes before the bell, I say it is shaping to be an energy lead kind of day. If it is, SLB, Schlumberger, looks like it's breaking out. And then I'm watching the afternoon bell, it's flushed down big. It became oversold, and I say, just keep in mind, it's 6:01 a.m., about 30 minutes before the bell. Just keep in mind, the Dixie is now oversold in short run charts. It will attempt to rebound in the open. If it does, and then fails to get 103 as support, that would be the confirmation of the continuation of the rally. Then, when we see dollar rebounding before the bell, 6:20 Pacific time. I say Dixie's rebounding right now. Let's see where it goes before reversing. If it does below 103, we rally, led by energy. Above 103, and down we go. Now mind you, look at the Dixie's chart. If you're looking at the 1 minute, 3 minutes, that's insignificant. I'm talking about closing above 103 in a more significant chart, such as the 15, the 30, hourly, etc. What do you know? The dollar gets above 103 momentarily. Then it loses 103 support. It becomes clear the dollar is not going to make it. Down it goes. What does that mean? The rally will continue, but we go with the Qs, we go with the IWM, we go with energy percent. 6:33 a.m. 3 minutes after the bell. I say SLB, CBX, DLO. I'm playing the dollar moving down by going long energy, even if it is the JK. Then around 7 a.m. they say Dixie can't make it above 103 stable, sticking with energy here. Then guess what happens? Energy takes the lead, goes get number one, and capturing all back. Boom. That leads us to the conversation that we talked about a few videos ago. And I said, hey, warning, the Fed cannot cut rates even if they wanted to, because the Fed cannot afford to see the dollar go down. So the Fed doesn't like that. The Fed might fight it in an attempt to revive the dollar. But Jerome Powell's not going to speak until, what, a few weeks from now? In the meantime, the dollar continues to go down. Guess what's going to happen? We'll be reviving the energy. Oil prices will move higher again. Natural gas prices will move higher again. That's inflation. So the morons celebrating the drop in the CPI by what, 0.1%? Meanwhile, inflation, even with the cook data, at 6.5%, which is historically high, and crushing to the economy and the consumer spending power, which is the second. I say the drop in the CPI is a double-edged sword. Of course, on one hand, you say inflation's going down, the Fed is going to be aggressive, higher we go in the equities market, we have soft landing, no loss of jobs, these days, significant lack. The problem is, the weakness for a rebound and revival of inflation is still here. Because guess what happens when inflation goes down, when prices go down, and folks still have their jobs, they still have their daily salaries. What do you think will happen? They lower or aggregate demand will kick in. The consumer will start splurging again, especially if they get the green light by the Fed that the Fed is backing off. No more interest rate hikes. What does that mean? We go back to swiping those credit cards up and down, up and down, up and down, and splurging in the economy. And the dollar goes down. Commodities move higher in price. Here we go. We have inflation coming back better, stronger, and with more veracity. And then the Fed realizes they made a mistake. Whoops. And they have to come back at it with more aggression, and that will be destructive to the economy. We'll take it one step at a time because we have no idea how the Fed is going to fight this. The Fed wants to keep the dollar propped up because this is the best insurance policy against inflation. So are they going to come out right away by sending Bullard or Harker or Kashkari to knock some sense into the market? They could do that, but I cannot guarantee that the market is going to listen. The market is only going to listen when the FOMC comes out and Jerome Powell comes out with the hammer. But until then, if the conditions we've seen today continue, we will see the dollar continuing to go down. The impact will be inflationary, which will push energy prices up. That makes the revival, the energy trade. And this intro out of the way, let's get right into it. Here it is. In focus 9. Be careful what you wish for. You might just get it. You want the Fed to ease, at least you want to assume they're going to ease and back off. The dollar goes down, inflation goes higher, and it becomes a lose-lose kind of game. The number we got today from the cooks at the bureau, the CPI, 6.5% year over year in December, and it stands at 5.7% if we take the non-important food, energy, and perhaps oxygen too. Yet the most important number we pay attention to is the month-over-month reading. The month-over-month reading for the CPI all in all down 0.1%, and less food and energy was actually up by 0.3%. And as you can see, the categories that went higher month-over-month, gas services up 3% since November, thank you to the state of California and our beloved governor, King John Newsom. Hospital services up, meats, poultry, fish, eggs, that's up, electricity, motor vehicle repairs, rent, that's up too. So did insurance, apparel, alcoholic beverages, non-alcoholic beverages, medical care commodities, in addition to physician services, while cereal and bakery products were pretty much flattish month-over-month. What went down in price month-over-month, new vehicles, tobacco and smoking products, dairy, fruits, vegetables, used cars, airline fares. That doesn't make sense at all. We covered that in details in last night's video. In any case, gasoline down along with fuel oil, which led to declines month over month. What is the reaction by the Fed? Take, for example, St. Louis Fed President Jim Blades. Came out and said, the Federal Reserve's front-loading strategy, interest rate hikes last year, was a success. Could be continued. Whoops. He also added, we're moving into an era of higher nominal interest rates for quite a while. Here's what I got to say about this. The Fed versus the market continues. The market continues to say that the Fed is bluffing. They're not going to really raise interest rates. They're not going to be higher for longer. They're not going to pause and hold. They're going to actually cut rates, whether they like it or not. The market continues to fight back. Of course, the Fed is going to win at the end of the day, but the fight between the market and the Fed proves to be disastrous because as the market continues to fight the Fed, by rallying high, including the stupid meme stocks and the mania, cryptos, tulips, crap, what do you think will happen? Financial conditions will loosen more, the dollar is going to get crushed more, commodities will appreciate in price more, and then the Fed will have to come back with more pressure, not less. In the meantime, how do we play this strategy? Of course, in my opinion, do your own research and take whatever steps you deem appropriate. But for me, the New Year rally has 3 stages. Stage number 1. I've been talking about this for a while now. Stage number 1 will be led by small caps, high beta, low quality leadership. We're talking about the IWM, Bed Bath & Beyond, AMC, Carvana, GameStop, RKK, the crash candidates. They've been blasting significantly higher. Now I think we're done with this stage. We're moving to stage number 2. Because we now have a confirmation that the dollar indeed broke important and critical support. You can play this in many ways. You can chase the rally in metals, for example. You can chase the rally in cryptos if you want. But the way I'm playing it is via the energy leadership, which I believe this stage started today. As the dollar continues to go down, energy moves higher. We'll cover a lot of energy charts in a minute, but stage number 3, which will mark the end of this rally, the rotation to value, aka last year's winners. So in stage 3, we see the names that are being dumped right now, such as Big Pharma, the defense contractors, defensives, utilities, even some of the real estate names taking the leadership. And when you notice and you see that happening, you know that the bear market rally is ending. But another important sign for the end of the bear market rally is, most importantly, of course, the change in sentiment. Because heading into this year, everybody and their mothers became bears. All of a sudden, of course. I've been bearish when everybody was bullish and got it right. Now, all of a sudden, these strategists and so-called experts, they got caught with their pants down. They lost an insane amount of money last year. They lost their clients, most importantly, an insane amount of money. They were embarrassed about it. So they became bearish all of a sudden. We head into this year with extreme bearishness across the board. What do you know? The market rallies higher instead. So the Johnny-come-lately bears all of a sudden embarrassed because the moment they change their sentiment, the market goes the other way. So what's going to happen now? With the reading of the CPI, with the dollar going down, with the yields going down, with the SPY, the Qs, the IWM, the rest of them all moving higher, with the revival of the meme stock mania, with perhaps more significant technical breakouts. We talked about the sloping line of resistance in the SPX, the S&P 500, and if that's broken to the upside, everybody and their mothers will become bullish again. You're going to start to see Tom Lee on TV every single day. You're going to start to read the comments on this channel saying, hey, Maverick, you're wrong. You're a perma bear. You missed the bottom. The bull market is back. Then you know that they're going to pull the rug and the bear market resumes. Now, heed this warning. I say that we're seeing the revival of the energy trade and the revival of inflation because the dollar is down. It's going to take a while till the Fed comes out and knocks some sense into the market. That they cannot afford to watch the dollar collapsing because this will push commodities higher. But until then, energy takes the lead if the dollar continues to go down and the Fed fails to knock some sense into the market. However, pay attention now. If the Fed indeed succeeds in rescuing the dollar by sending Kashkari out, or Williams, or Daly, or whoever zombie they want to send, and the market ends up listening to what the Fed is saying, the dollar is going to rebound higher, energy will go down. But absent of this scenario, the market is now not listening to the Fed at all. If that is the case, dollar goes down, energy takes the lead, forget about technology, that is a bull crap. So let's look at some energy charts here, and we start with the strong and we end with the weak. Now, here's a strong looking chart, the ticker HES for Hess Corporation. I tweeted this, discorded this today. Look at the weekly chart, we have a bull flag pattern that is breaking out. It is making higher highs. In other words, HES is looking good right now. If the dollar continues to go down, higher it goes. Another decent looking chart is SLB. I've been long this name for a while now. And it is breaking out. It was in consolidation pattern. This is a weekly chart, of course. And then it became a bull flag consolidation pattern. And now the name's breaking out. Now, at some point, SLB will face overbought conditions in the weekly and move down in the pullback. But for now, the chart looks strong. The chart is breaking out. Another good-looking chart is HAL Halliburton. Weekly chart, moving higher, making higher lows, maintaining the pattern. It did fill the gap this week, and it is facing the prior high. This will be resistance for now. And if the name cracks above it and closes the week above it, most importantly, then we have a bullish sign, a buy sign, because HAL is making new highs. Another strong-looking chart, perhaps not as strong as SLB and HAL, is VLO Valero. We talked about this chart before, a weekly chart, and perhaps we're seeing the formation of a cup and handle. If it is, then sooner or later VLO cracks above the sloping line of resistance, making a new high. Then we have another chart looking good, not bad at all. Weekly chart for CVX Chevron. It is in a consolidation pattern. It is now facing the prior high. It did close above it before, but it's going down to seek some more support. If it does, and it moves higher, making a new high, that would be a buy signal because CVX will continue the bullish momentum, the bullish trend still intact here. Now, another way we can look at the weekly chart for CVX is, what if this is a cup and handle formation in the making? If it is, it breaks higher, and we make higher highs in this chart. Now, here's another one, perhaps not strong, maybe a little weak here. PXD, for Pioneer Natural Resources. It had a trend, a bullish trend. It broke it before, at least twice, but it is fighting back. Now, if it wins, earns a place back into the consolidation pattern, then the likelihood becomes the name will crack above the resistance, the top of the consolidation pattern, and make a new high. Last but not least, a natural gas play, EQT weekly chart looking weak because we have a rolling top pattern and a broken important support line of 35, but it is fighting back. Look at the RSI and MACD indicators. We're seeing the negative momentum sort of bottoming for now. If this continues, and we see EQT breaking above this rolling top, saucer topping formation, and most importantly, recapturing 35 on a weekly basis, then we do have a reversal in hand and EQT moves higher. I don't know if it's going to make a higher high, but it could be worth playing some upside here. Anyhow, this is my 2 cents. If the Fed fails to rescue the dollar all the way to the FOMC, then higher we go, and the rally will be led by energy. Now, do your own research and take my word for it, otherwise you might end up losing all of your money. With that being said, let's move on to the coverage of the stock market. We begin with the closing of the indices today, and here we go. The Dow Industrial Average in the green, 216.96 points, or a gain of 0.64%. The Nasdaq also positive for the day by 69.
Your turret. turret has been destroyed.